Contents. Abstract. 5. What is the Qur'an? 6. The science of Quranic exegesis. 6. Science in the Qur'an. 8. Analysis of Chapter 23. 12. 1. Essence/extract of clay. 13. The human body is not made out of clay. 14. 2. Drop of fluid. 14. 3. In a safe place. 17. 4. A clinging form. 19. Hanging/suspended. 20. Suckling blood. 22. Leech/worm-like substance. 22. Blood clot. 26. Misrepresenting the embryo's appearance. 28. 5. A lump of flesh. 29. A chewed substance. 30. 6. Bones. 32. From a lump to bones. 35. Not real bones. 35. 7. We clothed those bones with flesh. 36. Why use flesh and not muscle? 38. What was created first, bones or muscle? 38. 8. We made him into other forms. 39. Did the prophet plagiarize ancient Greek embryology? 40. Does similarity imply plagiarism? 41. Did the prophet learn Hellenic medicine from someone who studied Greek medicine? 42. Hellenic medicine was known, adopted and utilized by Arabian, or Arabic-speaking, society in the early 7th century. 46. 1. The Prophet Muhammad could not have acquired knowledge of Hellenic embryology via written works. 46. A note on the 6th century Syriac and Latin translations. 48. 2. The Prophet Muhammad could not have been influenced by popular medical practice with a supposedly Hellenic flavor. 49. 3. The Prophet Muhammad could not have acquired Hellenic embryology from 7th century Arabian common knowledge. 51. Was the Prophet a liar? 52. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. 53. Are Hellenic and Quranic views on embryology similar? 53. Aristotle and the Qur'an. 53. Galen and the Qur'an. 55. First stage. 55. Second stage. 58. Third stage. 59. Early Greek translations of the Qur'an. 60. The similarities between Galenic embryology and the Qur'an. 62. Medieval Arabic medical texts and Galenic stages. 62. Did the Prophet dissect human and animal embryos? 63. Is the Qur'an inaccurate concerning where sperm comes from? 63. Do the prophetic traditions undermine the scientific accuracy of the Qur'an? 65. Gender determination. 65. Do the stages last 40 days each? 66. The prophetic and Jewish traditions. 66. A note on using translations. 69. Conclusion. 70. Glossary. 71. Contact. 73. References. 74. Abstract. This paper is an analysis of Chapter 23 verses 12 to 14 of the Qur'an in light of modern embryology. This study will provide a linguistic breakdown of the relevant verses and correlate these linguistic items to established facts in the field of embryology. To ensure a comprehensive understanding of this study, an overview of Quranic exegesis will be provided to appreciate how the Qur'an is made accessible and intelligible to the reader. This study will also address various contentions which attempt to challenge the credibility of the Quranic discourse and its concurrence with modern embryology. Among These responses will be a refutation of the ancient Greek, Hellenic, plagiarism thesis. This thesis maintains that Hellenic embryology was the source of the Qur'an's, and by extension, the Prophet Muhammad's medical knowledge. In chapter 23 verses 12 to 14, the Qur'an provides 8 meaningful points describing the process of the developing human embryo. We created man from an essence of clay, then we placed him as a drop of fluid in a safe place. Then we made that drop of fluid into a clinging form, and then we made that form into a lump of flesh, and we made that lump into bones, and we clothed those bones with flesh, and later we made him into other forms. Glory be to God, the best of creators. 1. At first glance, the English translation of the Qur'an's embryonic description seems uninvolved and simplistic. However, as this study will show through linguistic analysis of the Arabic Qur'an, each word conveys a depth of meaning that, upon closer look, correlates staggeringly to established reality. What is the Qur'an? Linguistically, the word Qur'an means reading and came to be referred to as the text which is read. The Qur'an also calls itself al-Kitab, which lexically implies a written book. Thus, the significance of writing, reading and reflecting upon the Qur'an has been emphasized from the very beginning of Islam. The Quranic material is divided into suwar, 2 meaning chapters in Arabic. According to the historian Philip Hitti, the collected written text of the Qur'an is one of the youngest epoch making books and the most widely read book ever written. 3. The Qur'an is the supreme authority in Islam, as it is the fundamental and essential source of the Islamic creed, ethics, laws, and guidance. For Muslims, the Qur'an is of divine origin. It is the speech of the Creator and not the word of the Prophet Muhammad, for rather, it was revealed to him, and through him to mankind, in word and meaning. Aziz Arqani, a 9th century scholar of the Qur'an, summarizes the description of the book. He writes, "The Qur'an is the Arabic speech of God, which he revealed to Muhammad in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the compiled written pages of the Qur'an, and has reached us by recurrent reporting." 5. The science of Quranic exegesis. The Qur'an, like any other legislative and spiritual book, requires exegesis. Quranic exegesis, known as tafsir in Arabic, is essentially the knowledge through which one increases an understanding of the Qur'an and a comprehension of its commandments and wisdom. 6. Quranic exegesis is a branch of knowledge dealing with the method of the delivery of the words of the Qur'an, their interpretation, their individual and composite forms and expediencies. 7. It is this science by which the Qur'an is understood, its meanings explained, and its rulings derived. Thus, the Qur'an is made accessible and intelligible to the reader. What follows are the main sources of Quranic exegesis used by exegetes to interpret the Qur'an. 1. The Qur'an. The first source of exegesis is the Qur'an itself. Many verses in the Qur'an complement and clarify the meaning of other verses. 8. This use of intertextuality is considered significant in the study of linguistics. 9. The following is an example of the Qur'an explaining itself through relevant verses. A. The path of those you have favored is here unexplained but then elaborated upon in a verse elsewhere in the Qur'an. 10. See below. B. Those whom God has favored, such as the prophets, loyal persons, martyrs and honorable men. How fine are such companions! 11. 2. The prophetic traditions. The second source is the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad. 12. The Qur'an often mentions the Prophet's role of expounding upon the Qur'an in word and deed. 13. 3. The statements of the companions. The third source is the explanations of the companions of the Prophet, who learnt the Qur'an directly from him. Many of them devoted their entire lives to studying the Qur'an, its exegesis and related knowledge. 14. 4. The Arabic language. Another source of exegesis is the Arabic language in which the Qur'an was revealed. The Arabic language is used as a tool to analyze verses if the other sources do not offer an interpretation. Science in the Qur'an. The Qur'an's relationship with science has been discussed for centuries, with scholars debating whether to use science as an exegetical tool to elucidate its meanings. The 14th century scholar Al-Shatibi disputes the claim that the Qur'an includes knowledge of the natural sciences. He argues that the Qur'an is a religious book which is mainly focused on the manifestation of the divine will in the human sphere of existence. Al-Shatibi writes, "Many people have overstepped all bounds and made undue claims about the Qur'an when they assign to it all types of knowledge of the past and the present, such as the natural sciences, mathematics and logic." 15. Conversely, the 11th century theologian and philosopher, Al-Ghazali, asserts that although the Qur'an doesn't present scientific details, it does provide the metaphysical framework to understand science. Al-Ghazali views the Qur'an as providing the foundations to all types of knowledge. For example, he states that all knowledge is implied in the signs and indications in the Qur'an. 16. And in his book The Jewels of the Qur'an he argues that the principles of various sciences are not outside the divine book. 17. Al-Ghazali's views are substantiated by the mainstream scholarly perspective that the Qur'an is an intrusive text that seeks to engage with the inner dimensions of man. Communicative strategies employed by the Qur'an to achieve this include the technique of asking questions and referring to signposts to God. These signposts include the innumerable wonders that can be seen in the natural world, such as the planets orbiting the sun, the stars, the alternation of the night and day, the various animals and insects, and the intricacies of our own psychological and physiological development. In this context, there are an estimated 750 verses concerning science and natural phenomena. 18. Science, as defined by the philosopher Bertrand Russell, is the attempt to discover, by means of observation and reasoning based upon it, particular facts about the world, and the laws connecting facts with one another. 19. Although there is no consensus over the definition of science, it seems that Russell's definition, when applied to the Qur'an, offers an array of verses pointing to scientific study. Some examples include, "And who created all things and made them to an exact measure." 20. "We shall show them our signs in every region of the earth and in themselves, until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth." 21. "There truly are signs in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of the night and day, for those with understanding." 22. "In the creation of the heavens and earth, in the alternation of the night and day, in the ships that sail the seas with goods for people, in the water which God sends down from the sky to give life to the earth when it has been barren, scattering all kinds of creatures over it, in the changing of the winds and clouds that run their appointed courses between the sky and earth, there are signs in all of these for those who use their minds." 23. This, however, does not imply the Qur'an is a book of science, rather, it is a book of ayat, which is commonly interpreted as verses and linguistically conveys various meanings, such as sign, proof, evidence and miracle. 24. Thus, the Quranic verses pertaining to the natural world are not intended to provide detailed descriptions of nature. Rather, they are meant to encourage thinking and reflection. Commenting on this, Professor of Philosophy Shabir Akhtar in his book The Qur'an and the Secular Mind, A Philosophy of Islam writes, "Nature's flawless harmonies and the delights and liabilities of our human environment, with its diverse and delicate relationships, are invested with religious significance. Created nature is a cryptogram of a reality which transcends it. Nature is a text to be deciphered. Evidence is accumulating in the material and social worlds and in the horizons jointly point to a hidden immaterial order. 25. It is important to note that Islamic scholarship does not adhere to the view that science is the only method to discover truths about man, life and the universe. In fact, Islamic scholarship views science as a useful method of study which has a limited scope and should not be solely relied upon when assessing the truth of our existence. This philosophical position is based on various arguments. For example, science, or more specifically scientism, which is the view that we should believe only what can be proven scientifically, is self-defeating. Scientism claims that a proposition is not true if it cannot be scientifically proven. However, the above claim itself cannot be scientifically proven. Therefore, according to this claim, the claim itself is not true. Hence, scientism is self-defeating. Scientism cannot prove necessary truths like mathematics and logic. For example, if P implies Q, and P, then Q and 3 plus 3 equals 6 are necessary truths and not merely empirical generalizations. In fact, scientism requires these necessary truths but it cannot prove them, and any attempt to do so would be tantamount to arguing in a circle. Scientism has a limited scope as it cannot provide a basis for moral truths. For instance, biology or evolution cannot provide rational explanations for the meaningfulness of good and bad. This is because evolution implies that we are just byproducts of a lengthy biological process. Our morals have developed like our ears or teeth. Since evolutionary changes are inventable, moral truths will also change. From this perspective, morality has no meaning, as the philosopher of science Michael Ruse aptly states. The position of the modern evolutionist is that humans have an awareness of morality. Because such an awareness is of biological worth. Morality is a biological adaptation no less than our hands and feet and teeth considered as a rationally justifiable set of claims about an objective something. Ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. Point 26. In considering the above discussion, the Islamic creedal position maintains that the Qur'an does not negate established realities or facts, and there is a scholarly consensus that its statements pertaining to the natural world are not confined to a 7th century understanding of nature. This is explained by the scholar Mohar Ali in his book The Qur'an and the Orientalists. Far from reproducing or reflecting the erroneous world view prevailing in the 7th century Arabia, the Qur'an indeed goes far beyond the scientific knowledge of the time and speaks of scientific facts and truths that have only recently been discovered by man. 27. To conclude this section, the fact that a 7th century document contains statements rejecting the established scientific assertions of its time, and complying with what is considered as established reality, makes evident the nature of the Qur'an as a signpost to the transcendent. This encourages contemplation, and facilitates the arrival at the conclusion that God is one and the Quranic discourse is divine. This paper will take one of these signs found in chapter 23 verses 12 to 14, and provide a linguistic breakdown correlating each keyword with modern embryology. Analysis of chapter 23. The Qur'an provides a concise and eloquent account of the developing human embryo. We created man from an essence of clay, then we placed him as a drop of fluid in a safe place. Then we made that drop of fluid into a clinging form, and then we made that form into a lump of flesh, and we made that lump into bones, and we clothed those bones with flesh, and later we made him into other forms. Glory be to God the best of creators. 28. 1. Essence/extract of clay. We created man from an essence, sulala, of min, clay, tin. This verse mentions that the first stage of the development of the human being is that man is formed from a sulala of clay. The word sulala means an extract. 29, something drawn. Out 30 or the most subtle, purest and essential constituent. 31. The classical exegetes of the Qur'an understood the words sulalate and min tin, an essence of clay, to specifically refer to the miraculous creation of Adam. These exegetes include the famous 13th century scholar from Córdoba, al-Qurtubi, 32, the 9th century Persian historian and scholar, al-Tabari, 33, and the 12th century Iraqi physician and historian al-Baghdadi, 34. Significantly, other exegetes suggest these words also refer to the essential elements of the human body, which consist of various chemical components found in clay. Both meanings are intelligible and therefore either can be adopted. Scientific interpretation. By applying a scientific analysis to this verse, it becomes clear that this stage appertains to certain essential chemical components. It is significant that these chemical components are found in clay. They include oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, chlorine, sodium, magnesium and silicon, all of which are required for human functioning and development. 35. This is explained by the jurist and exegete Shafi Usmani in his 8-volume exegesis of the Qur'an. He writes, the word sulala means extract and tin means wet earth or clay. And the verse means that man was created from some special elements extracted from earth. 36. This perspective highlights the Qur'an's alignment with modern science, as these elements are essential for human life. It also serves to convey the way the Qur'an uses perfectly accurate terms that convey the intended meaning using the briefest of speech. The human body is not made of clay. Contemporary critics state that the Qur'an is inaccurate concerning the development of the human being, as the human body is not made from clay. This argument stems from a misunderstanding of the Arabic language, as the key word allowing for the above interpretation is sulala, extract, something drawn out, etc. This clearly indicates that it is not clay from which the human is created, but an extract of clay, which alludes to the necessary chemical components required for human life. If this contention refers to the creation of Adam, then it can be addressed by referring to the Islamic theological understanding of miracles. The creation of Adam was not a natural event. Rather, it was a supernatural event that cannot be explained naturalistically. In summary, the creation of Adam from clay was a miracle. Summary box. The sulalate and min tin stage, the essential elements required for human life and functioning. Found in clay. 2. Drop of fluid. Then we placed him as a drop of fluid, nutfa. The next stage of the development of the human embryo is nutfa. This word has various meanings. By looking at the Arabic language, it can mean a dribble, a trickle, a drop or semen. 37. Nutfa can also mean a singular entity which is a part of a bigger group of its kind. This is suggested by the classical dictionary Lisan al-Arab, which explains nufta as a single drop of water remaining in an emptied bucket. 38. According to prophetic tradition, which can be found in Sahih Muslim in the book of menstruation, the Prophet Muhammad explained the male and female reproductive substances mix. 39. The Qur'an further clarifies that the nutfa is a single entity or a drop from a larger group of its kind by stating that the nutfa comes from semen, maniyan in Arabic. Had he not been a sperm, nutfa, from a semen, maniyan emitted. 40. This perspective on the nutfa highlights how the intended use of this word is not to portray the meaning of semen but rather that it is a substance from semen. This supports the view that it is a single substance from a larger group of its kind. The classical exegete Ibn Kathir comments on this verse and clarifies that the nutfa is a substance from semen. He states, meaning, was not man a weak drop of nutfa from a despised fluid, known as semen 41. Explaining its view on the word nutfa, the Qur'an in another verse elucidates how the human being is made from an extract of a liquid disdained, semen. Then he made his posterity out of the extract, sulala, of a liquid disdained 42. As previously discussed, the word sulala means an extract, something drawn out or the most subtle, purest and essential constituent. The above meanings and explications bring to light that the intended use of the word nutfa is a drop of a single extract, containing a specific substance like an egg or sperm, from the male semen and the female equivalent. Therefore, the word nutfa is not just another synonym for semen. The above view is supported by the Islamic scholarly tradition, which includes as Said Ibn Mansur, Ibn Abi Haytham and others, that maintain that there is something within the drop, nutfa, that is responsible for fertilization and the genetic makeup of the embryo 43. The companion of the Prophet Muhammad and the Quranic exegete, Ibn Abbas, mentions that the nutfa is from a weak drop of the water/fluid of man and woman 44. Ibn Kathir, while commenting on the second verse in chapter 76 of the Qur'an, cites Ibn Abbas as describing the nutfa stage as the mixing of two fluids, therefore confirming the statement above. This means the fluid of the man and the fluid of the woman when they meet and mix 45. Ibn Abbas above explanations seem to allude to the fact that the nutfa is just a fluid. Therefore, some commentators assert that this illustrates that the word nutfa is a synonym for the word semen. This assertion lacks a holistic understanding and it fails to take into account the other Quranic verses and the prophetic traditions referring to the nutfa. In the prophetic traditions, when describing semen in context of its appearance and form, the words mani and maniyin are used. This is consistent throughout various prophetic traditions that can be found in the collections of Muslim, Nisa'i, Ibn Majah, Abu Dawud and Bukhari. For example, in the book of Tahara, purification, in the collection of Sunan at-Tirmidhi, Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, narrates that she washed maniyin from the Prophet's garments 46. If the whole corpus of exegetically material is used to form an accurate perspective on the word nutfa, Ibn Abbas' statement should be taken in the context of the nutfa being a specific drop of fluid from the semen and not the semen itself. This is because the prophetic traditions use the words mani and nutfa in different contexts, and therefore clearly differentiate between the two terms, further highlighting that they are not synonyms. Additionally, the Quranic verses pertaining to the word nutfa clearly mention that the nutfa is an extract from semen, and not semen itself. In addition to the above, the Qur'an mentions another meaning for the word nutfa by describing it as a combination of mingled, alamshaj, substances. We created man from a drop, nutfa, of mingled fluid. 47. This verse, from a grammatical perspective, portrays an image of the nutfa as an entity made up of a combination of substances. The word alamshaj, mingled, is a plural adjective and it is used here with the singular noun nutfa. Grammatically, this highlights the verse's concept of the nutfa as being a single entity or drop produced by a combination of substances coming from the mother and the father. In light of this analysis, the word nutfa can mean a drop of fluid from the male and female that are extracts from a larger volume or group of its kind. It can also mean a single entity produced by a combination of drops from the semen and the female equivalent, which contain essential extracts or substances like a sperm, spermatozoon, or an egg, oocyte. Scientific interpretation. The principles put forward by both the Qur'an and the prophetic traditions coincide with what is known today of modern embryology. The nutfa stage specifically implies the process of fertilization, which requires the mingling of components from the father's semen and the mother's equivalent. These components form a single cell known as the zygote. In regard to this, embryologists John Allen and Beverly Kramer state, the human individual arises from the conjugation of two minute structures called cells, one from the mother, oocyte, and one from the father, spermatozoon. These are called gametes. Together, these gametes form a single cell, the zygote, from which the entire embryo, including its surrounding membranes, grows. 48. From a physiological perspective, each one of the two cell structures from both the mother and the father need to be contained in fluids necessary for fertilization. The spermatozoon is contained in fluid called semen, 49, and the oocyte is surrounded by follicular fluid which contains sex steroids, glycoprotein hormones, plasma proteins, mucopolysaccharides, and enzymes. 50. Interestingly, advancements in physiology concluded that the oocyte is coated in oviductal secretions required for its viability and fertilizability. Physiologists Bruce Copen and Bruce Stanton explain, oviductal secretions coat and infuse the cumulus oocyte complex and may be required for viability and fertilizability. 51. Thus, the analysis of the word nutfa as a single entity formed as a result of a combination of essential extracted substances that are contained in fluids necessary for fertilization. Semen and follicular fluid corresponds with the description of the zygote's formation. Summary box. The nutfa stage, the formation of the zygote, via the mingling of two fluids from the mother and the father, which contains two small cell structures, the oocyte and the spermatozoon. 3. In a safe place. In a safe, qur'an, place, makin. The next stage in the process of human development is qur'an makin. The word qur'an means to make sedentary, to establish, to assign, to schedule, to determine, to stipulate, to regulate and to decide, and it carries the further meanings of to confirm, to establish and to affirm. 52. The word makin has meanings that include to place, to put or set down firmly, and to put in position. 53. The combination of these two words provide connotations of, in a safe place, in a place firmly fixed, in a safe lodging, and in a firm resting place. Scientific interpretation. The terms used by the Qur'an at this stage coincide with modern embryology. The zygote divides into a ball of cells with an outer shell to form the blastocyst. Studies in embryology assert that around the 6th day after fertilization, the blastocyst implants itself securely into the uterine wall. John Allen and Beverly Kramer explain the process of implantation. Implantation begins at about the 6th to 7th day after fertilization. The part of the blastocyst projecting into the uterine cavity remains relatively thin. The centrophoblast contains a proteolytic enzyme, which causes destruction of the endometrial cells so that the blastocyst sinks deeper and deeper into the uterine mucosa. The final deficiency in the endometrium is sealed off by a blood or fibrin clot overlying the blastocyst. This cover is called the operculum. By about 10 to 12 days after fertilization, the blastocyst is completely encased in the endometrium and thus, implantation is complete. 54. The analysis of the words qur'an makin reflect modern developments in embryology. The meanings offered by the combination of the words qur'an makin depict the blastocyst sinking deeper and deeper and the sealing off of the endometrium with a fibrin clot, ensuring that the blastocyst is completely encased. Summary box. The Kararan-Makin stage, the blastocyst sinking in the endometrium, being completely encased, i.e. the process of implantation. 4. A clinging form. Then we made that drop of fluid into a clinging form, alaka. The Qur'an describes the next stage of the developing human embryo with the word alaka. This word carries various meanings including, to hang, to be suspended, to be dangled, to stick, to cling, to cleave and to adhere. It can also mean to catch, to get caught, to be affixed, or subjoined. 55 other connotations of the word alaka include a leech-like substance. 56. Having the resemblance of a worm, or being of a creeping disposition inclined to the sucking of blood. Finally, its meaning includes clay that clings to the hand, blood in a general sense and thick, clotted blood, because of its clinging together. 57. This view, that alaka means clotted blood, because of its clinging together, is supported by Ibn Kathir, as he explains the word to mean a dangling clot. 58. Scientific interpretation. As defined by modern embryology, the myriad of meanings for the word alaka correspond to various stages of the embryo's development. Comparisons can be drawn between Quranic and scientific depictions of the embryo's appearance and its relationship with the womb. According to modern embryology, from day 15, the embryo is hanging or suspended via the connecting stalk. See Figure 1, and it obtains nutrients through contact with the maternal blood vessels. This description bears a striking resemblance to the picture painted by the word alaka, a hanging or suspended substance, obtaining nutrients from its host's blood. Following this, during the 4th week, 2 processes occur, when the cranial and caudal ends of the neural tube close, known as neurulation, and the initial stages of the folding of the embryo. It is upon the culmination of these 2 processes that the embryo resembles a leech-like form suggested by the word alaka, a creeping, leech or worm-like substance. See Figure 2, 3 and 4. Another perspective on the embryo's external features is that it resembles that of a blood clot. Although the word alaka means clotted blood in the sense that it clings, some classical linguists indicate that it can also refer to a blood clot in its exact meaning. This perspective correlates with the development of the primary cardiovascular system and the fact that blood does not circulate until the end of 3rd week. See Figure 5. Below is a correlation of the following meanings of the word alaka in modern embryology: hanging/suspended, suckling blood, leech/worm-like substance, blood clot, hanging/suspended, the connecting stalk suspending the embryo. Embryologists Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma explain the hanging or suspended aspects of the alaka stage. They describe the embryo as being C2, IERA, Design, Embryology, Sketches, Figure 1 JPG. Connected to the cytotrophoblast by a connecting stalk of extra embryonic mesoderm, primitive connective tissue. The stalk is the forerunner of the umbilical cord. 59. Interestingly, John Allen and Beverly Kramer use the word suspend to describe the role of the connecting stalk. Caviation of the extra embryonic mesoderm does not occur at the connecting stalk, which remains intact to suspend the developing embryo in the extra embryonic chylome. 60. Figure 1 shows the embryo connected to the cytotrophoblast via a connecting stalk, as if it were hanging or suspended, suckling blood, obtaining nutrients via blood vessels. With regard to the way the embryo obtains its nutrients through contact with the maternal blood vessels, Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma write: due to the rapid growth of the embryo during the 2nd week, there is a need for a more efficient means of nutritional and gaseous exchange. This is achieved when the embryonic blood vessels of the chorion come into contact with the maternal blood vessels of the deciduous. 61. By the 3rd week, The exchange of nutrients, respiratory gases, and waste products between the maternal and fetal blood takes place across the placental membrane within intervillous spaces. Maternal blood enters these spaces from the spiral arteries, branches of the uterine artery, bringing nutrients and oxygen for the embryo and fetus. 62. This reinforces the validity of the meanings of aleka, and its evoking images of an entity obtaining its nutrients via blood. Leech/worm-like substance. Neurulation and the folding of the embryo. The aleka stage suggests the process of neurulation and the initial stages of the folding of the embryo. Neurulation describes the process when the cranial and caudal ends of the neural tube close from days 19 to 25, approximate, and the folding of the embryo involves the head and the tail being brought closer together. The combination of these two physiological changes causes the embryo to resemble a leech or worm-like substance. Neurulation. At the end of neurulation, the cranial and caudal ends of the neural tube close. The embryo at this point becomes leech or worm-like in appearance. 63. See Figure 2. Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma explain the process of neurulation. At about 19 days, at the cranial end of the primitive streak, the underlying mesoderm and notochord induce the ectoderm to form the neural plate, which rounds up to form the neural folds. The neural plate enlarges initially at the cranial end. At 20 days, the neural plate in the mid-region of the embryo remains narrowed, but it expands at the caudal end. The plate deepens to form the neural groove from which the neural tube forms. The cranial and caudal ends of the tube are open and are known as the anterior and posterior neuropores, these eventually close. 64. Figure 2 shows the process of neurulation. At the end of neurulation, 24 to 25 days, the cranial and caudal ends of the neural tube close. The embryo, at this point, becomes leech-like or worm-like in appearance. C2, IERA, Design, Embryology, Sketches, Figure 3 JPG. Folding of the embryo. The folding of the embryo is also responsible for forming a leech or worm-like shape. See Figure 3, or as embryologists have described, a cylindric or tube-like structure. Embryologists Keith Moore and T.V.N. Persad suggest that a significant event in the establishment of body form is the folding of the flat trilaminar embryonic disc into a somewhat cylindric embryo. Folding results from the rapid growth of the embryo, particularly the brain and the spinal cord. 65. Figure 3 shows the folding of the embryo where the head and tail are brought closer together. This process is also responsible for forming the leech-like or worm-like appearance of the embryo. Leech. The tube-like or leech-like structure. See Figure 4, as explained by Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma, is due to longitudinal folding, which occurs between days 21 and 24, resulting in the embryo bending so that the head and tail are brought closer together, to form a tube-like structure. 66. Figure 4 various visual representations of the human embryo at 24 to 30 days. A shows a lateral view of an embryo, size 2.5 to 30 mm, at days 24 to 25. Modified from Moore and Persad, the Developing Human 8th edition, B. Hirudomedicinalis, medicinal leech, modified from the human body. The Incredible Journey from Birth to Death, copyright BBC Worldwide Limited, 1998, c. Scanning electron micrograph of an embryo at week 4, 26 to 30 days. Professor Kathy Sulik, the University of North Carolina. Note how the human embryo looks like a leech or worm at this stage. Confirmation from scientists and embryologists supporting the above view that the embryo resembles a worm or leech-like substance. Scientists and embryologists have confirmed this depiction of the embryo by describing it as a leech and a worm. For instance, Dale Lehman in Anatomy Demystified describes the embryo as worm-like in appearance. Another membrane becomes the yolk sac, which provides nourishment for the early embryo. By 24 days, a connecting stalk appears in the middle of the now worm-like body. 67. Keith Moore concludes, the human embryo is truly leech-like. 68. Blood clot. The development of the primary cardiovascular system and the lack of blood circulation until the end of the 3rd week. The development of the primary cardiovascular system is responsible for the blood clot-like external features of the embryo. By the end of the 3rd week, the heart of the embryo connects with its blood vessels, the connecting stalk, the chorion and the yolk sac. It is during this period that the blood starts to circulate. Before this time the blood is fluid but does not move around the embryo. This resembles the physical description of a blood clot. Keith Moore and P.V.N. Persuad explain. The heart and great vessels form from mesenchymal cells in the heart primordium cardiogenic area. Paired, endothelium-lined channels endocardial heart tubes develop during the 3rd week and fuse to form a primordial heart tube. The tubular heart joins with blood vessels in the embryo, connecting stalk, chorion, and umbilical vesicle yolk sac to form a primordial cardiovascular system. By the end of the 3rd week, the blood is circulating, and the heart begins to beat on day 21 or 22.69. C2, IERA, Design, Embryology, Sketches, Figure 5.jpg. Figure 5. The development of the primary cardiovascular system. Notice how the embryo looks like a blood clot. Summary box. The Alaka stage. The embryo is connected to the cytotrophoblast via a connecting stalk, as if it were hanging or suspended. It is upon the culmination of 2 processes, neurulation and the folding of the embryo, that the embryo appears worm or leech-like. The embryo obtains its nutrients via contact with the maternal blood vessels. This mirrors the action of an entity obtaining its nutrients via blood. The external features of the embryo resembles a blood clot. This is due to the formation of the primary cardiovascular system and the lack of blood circulation until the end of the 3rd week. Misrepresenting the embryo's appearance. Contemporary commentators argue the embryo only looks leech-like when the yolk sac is removed, therefore the Alaka's description is a misrepresentation of the embryo's appearance at this stage. This contention is misplaced as embryologists consider the yolk sac, also known as the umbilical vesicle, to be an extra-embryonic feature and explain that the yolk sac is formed by extra-embryonic endodermal cells. 70-71. This fact disproves claims of misrepresentation as the yolk sac is not an internal feature of the embryo even though the yolk sac plays a significant role in the transfer of nutrients and the development of the primordial gut. 72. When the relationship between the embryo and the yolk sac has been described by embryologists, terminology has been used indicating it is an external embryonic feature. For instance, embryologist Bruce Carlson in his book Human Embryology and Developmental Biology includes the yolk sac under the chapter Placenta and Extra Embryonic Membranes. 73, therefore implying that it is external to the embryo's main body. Form. E. John Yo, D. Jerkovic, Y. Henriette, F. Rodas and J. Huston in their article Development of the Secondary Human Yolk Sac, Correlation of Sonographic and Anatomical Features refer to the yolk sac and embryo as having a dependence and a relationship, highlighting the view that the yolk sac is an extra-embryonic feature. Because of the close dependence between the embryo and the secondary yolk sac, it has been suggested that impairment of this relationship could affect normal embryonic development. 74. Another example to highlight how some embryologists describe the yolk sac as an external embryonic feature is the yolk sac's role in developing the primordial gut. Embryologists Keith Moore and T.V. N. Persad write. During the 4th week, the dorsal part of the umbilical vesicle yolk sac is incorporated into the embryo as a primordial gut. 75. The incorporation of the yolk sac into the embryo indicates that the yolk sac is not an internal embryonic feature. A final example to illustrate that the yolk sac is considered as an extra embryonic feature is how embryologists consider the yolk sac as being attached to the embryo. Bruce Carlson writes. By 12 to 13 days, the primary yolk sac collapses, leaving a smaller secondary yolk sac attached to the embryo. 76. On a final note, even if the yolk sac is considered as part of the embryo, it doesn't undermine what the Qur'an intends to portray. This is because even with the yolk sac, the embryo still looks worm or leech-like, but with the appearance of it sucking or being attached to an external substance. See Figure 3. 5. A lump of flesh. And then we made that form into a lump of flesh, mudga. The next stage of human development defined in the Qur'an is mudga. This term means to chew, mastication, chewing, to be chewed, and a small piece of meat. 77-78. It also describes the embryo after it passes to another stage and becomes flesh. 79. Other meanings include something that teeth have chewed and left visible marks on, and marks that change in the process of chewing due to the repetitive act. 80. The mudga stage is elaborated on further elsewhere in the Qur'an. Then from a fleshy lump, mudga, formed and unformed. 81. The Arabic word used here for formed is mukalka, which can also mean shaped or molded. 82. Scientific interpretation. Taking a lexical approach to the interpretation of the word, this stage deals with the 4th week, when somites begin to develop and shift their position to surround the neural tube and notochord. The appearance of the embryo at this stage corresponds with the meaning to be chewed and something that teeth have chewed and left visible marks on. See Figures 6 and 7. Concerning somite development, embryologist T.W. Sadler writes. When somites first form from presomatic mesoderm, they exist as a ball of mesoderm, fibroblast-like cells. These cells then undergo a process of epithelialization and arrange themselves in a donut shape around a small lumen. By the beginning of the 4th week, cells in the ventral and medial walls of the somite lose their epithelial characteristics, become mesenchymal, fibroblast-like, again, and shift their position to surround the neural tube and the notochord. Collectively, these cells form the sclerotome that will differentiate into the vertebrae and ribs. 83. Another meaning for the word mudga includes something looking like a morsel of flesh. This too is an accurate description of the embryo's appearance at this stage. Interestingly, the Quranic explanation of mudga as being formed and unformed can refer to the organogenetic period, during which all the main organs have begun to develop but are not yet fully formed. 84. This period also occurs at around the 4th week. A chewed substance. An argument raised by critics concerning the mudga stage is that a chewed piece of meat or a lump of flesh does not resemble the embryo at any stage described by modern embryology. In responding to this, it is necessary to clarify what constitutes a chewed piece of flesh. It includes, not just mastication, but also something being chewed just once. This maintains the meaning of the word mudga as the bite marks do resemble a piece of meat chewed once. This is highlighted by its other meaning, something that teeth have chewed and left visible marks on. C2, IERA, Design, Embryology, Sketches, Figure 6.jpg. Stage 12. Figure 6. Somites begin to develop and shift their position to surround the neural tube and notochord. Notice how with this lateral image and diagram of the embryo resembles something that has been chewed or a substance that teeth have left visible marks. Figure 7. A lateral view of the embryo at 26 to 30 days, 4th week. Notice how the image above has Teeth-like marks on the notochord. Summary box. The Mudga stage. The development of somites giving the embryo the appearance of a chewed substance. What looks like a morsel of flesh, an accurate description of embryo's appearance at this stage. It also describes the organogenetic period, the development of organs, not yet fully formed. 6. Bones. And we made that lump into bones. Idham. The next stage in embryonic development, according to the Qur'an, is the creation of idham from the mudga stage. The word idham in the Arabic language means bone, and is specifically applied to the bones of the hands and feet, or of the arms and legs of an animal, upon which is the flesh. 85. Scientific interpretation. The idham stage pertains to the development of the axial and limb skeleton, occurring around the 5th week. Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma explain. The origin of mesenchymal cells forming the skeletal tissues varies in different regions of the body. Mesenchymal cells forming the axial skeleton arise from the mesodermal somites, whereas the bones of the appendicular skeleton are derived from the somatopleuric mesenchyme of the lateral plate mesoderm. After reaching their destination, the mesenchymal cells condense and form models of bones. The subsequent differentiation of mesenchymal cells into chondroblasts or osteoblasts is genetically controlled. 86. Limb bones is the specified meaning of the word idham, and therefore can refer to the development of the limb buds which give rise to the development of the limbs and the appendicular skeleton. Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma elaborate on the formation of the limb and appendicular skeleton. The appendicular skeleton consists of limb girdles and the bones of the limbs. The bones of the appendicular skeleton develop from mesenchymal condensations which become cartilaginous models. 87. See Figure 8. John Allen and Beverly Kramer also comment on limb bone formation. The limb mesenchyme is at first a homogeneous mass, but soon condensations occur in it and these chondrify to form cartilaginous models of the various bones. Each cartilage model is surrounded by perichondrium, which is a condensation of mesenchyme. An ossific center, primary ossification center, is formed upon each cartilage model by the ingrowth of osteoblasts, bone forming cells, from the surrounding mesenchyme. The surrounding mesenchyme is now termed periosteum, surrounding the bone. Osteoblasts now produce bone which give rise to the skeletal elements of the limbs. 88. C2, IERA, Design, Embryology, Sketches, Figure 8 JPG. Figure 8 The development of limb bone. There are clear parallels between the Quranic idham stage and the view modern embryology takes, i.e. the development of the axial, limb and appendicular skeleton. Summary box. The idham stage, the formation of the axial, limb and appendicular skeleton. From a lump to bones. A common misconception, usually made by those unfamiliar with Arabic, is that this verse can be literally translated as "and we made that lump into bones." From this, they conclude that this verse is unscientific because a lump of flesh cannot turn into a mass of bones. However, this is based upon a crude understanding of Arabic grammar and the Qur'an's eloquence. This verse, from a grammatical perspective, has the meanings of, "and we made," of / from / out of the lump, bones. This is why the Indian Islamic scholar Yusuf Ali translates this verse as "then we made out of that lump bones." M.H. Shakir translates it as "then we made, in, the lump of flesh, bones." 89 And the British scholar of Arabic and Islamic studies A.J. Arbery, in his translation of the Qur'an, which is still used by academics today, translates this verse as "then we created of the tissue bones." 90. Not real bones. Another contention from commentators is that at this stage there are no real bones. It is argued that the apparent bones are mere cartilage, as ossification is incomplete and Therefore, the Qur'an is inaccurate. They further assert that the Arabic term for cartilage, Gurduf 91, should have been used instead of idham. Although a valid contention, it is misplaced. The Arabic word for cartilage refers to a type of cartilage that is not a precursor to bones, but rather remains as flexible connective tissue. It is, according to Lane's Arabic English lexicon, any soft bone, such as is, or may be eaten, and i.e. the soft or cartilaginous part, the firm part that is harder than flesh and softer than bone, of the nose. 92. Conversely, the word idham encompasses the cartilaginous form of the bones as the skeletal framework is put in place. Furthermore, the use of the word idham is more accurate because it also carries the meaning of bone, but properly applied to the bones of the hands and feet, or of the arms and legs, of an animal, upon which is the flesh. 93. Since flesh, in other words muscles and tendons, is subsequently formed around the limb bones of the developing human, the use of the word idham is more apt as it encompasses the description of limb bones that have flesh upon them. See next stage. Additionally, the process of ossification begins by the 8th week, 94, and continues on after birth. The ossification process completes around puberty. Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma explain. The centers of ossification first appear in the limb bones during the 8th week. By the 12th week, the shafts of the limb bones are ossified, though the carpal bones of the wrist remain cartilaginous until after birth. The ossification of the 3 largest tarsal bones of the ankle begins about 16 weeks, but some of the smaller tarsal bones do not ossify until 3 years after birth. 95. From this perspective, it would be a medical absurdity to assume newborns or young teenagers do not have bones simply because they require ossification, especially since ossification completes at the end of the growth spurt of puberty. Nevertheless, if this were the case, and we were to consider this stage as being boneless, the connotations of the word idham allow for an all-encompassing interpretation because the cartilaginous models of the various bones. 96 are included in its meaning. 7. We clothed those bones with flesh. We clothed, Khazana, the bones with flesh, Lam. The next stage in the Quranic description of the development of the human embryo is clothing the bones with flesh. The word khazana means to clothe, to dress, to garb, and to attire. It also carries the meanings of to hang, to drape, to face, to line, and to case. Further interpretations of the word include to encase, to cover, to put, to slip, and to give the appearance of and make look like. 97. The word lam means flesh, meat, or a piece of flesh or meat. 98-99. Scientific interpretation. The words used in the Qur'an to describe this stage are remarkably consistent with modern embryology. The word khazana denotes the migration and aggregation of the myoblasts, which organize into dorsal and ventral muscle masses surrounding the developing skeleton. These physiological developments are illustrated by the meanings that khazana carries, such as to clothe, to dress, to encase, and to cover. The word lam is not just limited to the limb muscles but also applies to the muscles masses surrounding the axial skeleton. Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma elucidate the process of muscle formation over the developing limb skeleton. The limb muscles differentiate from myoblasts in the proximal part of the limb bud, and soon receive their innervations from the ventral rami of the spinal nerves. The myoblasts then migrate distally and soon become organized into a dorsal and ventral muscles mass surrounding the developing skeleton, carrying their innervations with them. 100. John Allen and Beverly Kramer confirm how limb muscles are formed. Soon after the cartilaginous models of the bones have been established, the myogenic cells, which have now become myoblasts. Aggregate to form muscle masses on the ventral and dorsal aspects of the limbs. These muscle masses, the relevant compartments, form the flexors and extensors of the joints. Rotator muscles are also formed, so that flexors and pronators are related and extensors and supinators are related. 101. The process of muscular formation is not just limited to the limbs. Once the skeletal framework is in place, muscles start to form around the developing skeleton. For example, Bruce Carlson highlights how the facial musculature forms once the basic facial skeletal structure takes place. 102. Summary box. The Kazana and Lam, the key words in this stage, the migration and aggregation of the muscle cells around the developing limb and axial skeleton, to form muscles, tendons and connective tissue. Why use flesh and not muscle? Critics of the Quranic description of the developing human embryo maintain that the word lam, flesh, is not the most accurate word to use, and the word adlat, muscle, is more appropriate. This contention is insubstantial because the word lam is far more comprehensive, as it includes muscle and other aspects of flesh such as tendons and connective tissue in its meaning, all of which are involved at this stage. John Allen and Beverly Kramer explain. Ultimately, the muscles and tendons become attached to the bony structures so that they can produce their actions across the joints. 103. This statement proves that using adlat, muscle, in reference to this stage is imprecise. It is only the word lam, flesh, used by the Qur'an, that carries sufficient comprehensiveness in its meaning to describe what occurs in this stage. What was created first, bones or flesh? Commentators on the Quranic description of the developing human embryo claim the Qur'an portrays an inaccurate succession of events with regards to the bones and the clothing of the flesh. They declare that bone and muscle formations occur simultaneously, and that the Qur'an uses the connective particle fa, which in the context of the verse, indicates a quick succession of one thing happening after the other. For instance, the Qur'an says, "We made that lump into bones, and, fa, we clothed those bones with flesh." This view represents a misunderstanding of the linguistic context of the verse. The Qur'an's use of the particle fa is not in the context of creating, rather, it is in the context of clothing the bones with flesh. The Qur'an does not specify when the flesh, or muscles, were formed. It only specifies when the clothing of the limb bones with flesh happens. This, as John Allen and Beverly Kramer explain, is straight after. Soon after the cartilaginous models of the bones have been established, the myogenic cells, which have now become myoblasts, aggregate to form muscle masses on the ventral and dorsal aspects of the limbs. 104. A significant clarification to make is that this contention, incorrect as it is also not based on a consensus amongst embryologists. According to many embryologists, limb bone and muscle formation are not simultaneous. For example, embryologist Bruce Carlson confirms that the limb bones are formed before the limb muscles. The skeleton is the first major tissue of the limb to show overt signs of differentiation. 105. 8. We made him into other forms. Then we made him into other, akara, forms, kalkan. The word kalkan means to shape, to form and to mold. It also means to make, to create and to originate. 106. The word akara means another or one more. 107. Al-Raza quotes the companion of the Prophet and Quranic exegete, Ibn Abbas, that other forms signifies all various types of growth including fetal, infancy, and childhood. 108. Scientific interpretation. The terms used in the Qur'an to describe the final process correspond to modern embryology. From the 8th week to the end of pregnancy, the period of growth and enlargement occurs, during which the baby begins to form human-specific aesthetic features. This is usually called the fetal stage. The baby's shape develops from indistinguishable to being molded and made to look like the human form. Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma convey this stage of growth. The period of time from the end of week 8 to full term, 38 weeks, is a phase of growth and enlargement, the fetal period. 109. T.W. Sadler confirms that this stage is where the embryo becomes more human-looking and is characterized by rapid growth. The period from the beginning of the 9th week to birth is known as the fetal period. It is characterized by maturation of tissues and organs and rapid growth of the body during the 3rd month. The face becomes more human-looking. 110. Summary box. The Kalkanakara stage, the end of the embryonic stage, and the beginning of a new phase of growth where the embryo is characterized as more human-looking. Did the Prophet plagiarize ancient Greek embryology? Commentators assert that the Quranic view on human development was plagiarized from Hellenic embryology. They specifically claim that the Prophet Muhammad plagiarized the works of the ancient Greek philosopher and polymath Aristotle, and the 2nd century physician and philosopher Galen. To respond to this accusation, this section will articulate the mainstream Islamic scholarly position that the Prophet did not plagiarize or borrow ideas from Hellenic medicine. Does similarity imply plagiarism? To address the contention that the Prophet Muhammad borrowed or plagiarized Hellenic views on embryology, the philosophical implications of inferring plagiarism from similarity must be discussed. If there is a similarity between two things X and Y, to make the inference that X copied Y, or Y copied X would require some form of evidence. Otherwise, the argument will be fallacious as it will commit the fallacy of argumentum ad ignorantium, in other words, arguing from ignorance. Take the following example into consideration. There are 2 patent applications that have arrived at the Patent Office in the UK. The patent officer examines both applications and they appear to have a similar design for a particular product. Can the patent officer claim plagiarism? No. To justify this claim, the patent officer would require a practical link establishing a connection between both authors of the patents in question. In absence of a practical link, the assertion that they copied each other is speculative and untenable. This also applies to the assertion that the Prophet plagiarized Hellenic embryology. In light of the above, practical links establishing a valid connection between the Qur'an and Hellenic embryology must be specific and direct. Non-direct evidence, such as an assumed popularized culture of Hellenic embryology, is not enough to prove borrowing or plagiarism. An inference made from such an assumption is weak unless all other possible explanations have been shown to be wrong or explained as improbable. For example, historians claim that there was some cultural exchange between the Greeks, Romans and Arabs. Evidence to support such a claim includes trade routes, the practice of cupping and cauterization. However, from this evidence, can the inference that the Prophet borrowed Hellenic views on embryology be made? The structure of the argument can be presented in the following way. 1. There were some cultural exchanges between Arabs and Greeks. 2. The Prophet was an Arab. 3. Therefore the Prophet plagiarized Hellenic views on embryology. Based on the above, how does the conclusion, point 3, logically follow? For the commentators to claim that the Prophet plagiarized Hellenic embryology based on the above argument is unwarranted. This is due to the fact they have assumed some hidden premises. These premises include: a. The Prophet learned Hellenic embryology from someone who studied Greek medicine. b. Hellenic medicine was known, adopted and utilized by Arabian, or Arabic speaking, society in the early 7th century. c. The Prophet was a liar, as he claimed the Qur'an to be the word of God and not the borrowed knowledge of Hellenic embryology. d. Hellenic and Quranic views on embryology are similar. These premises will be addressed below to provide a strong case against the plagiarism. Thesis. Did the Prophet learn Hellenic medicine from someone who studied Greek medicine? According to the various biographies of the Prophet Muhammad, the only person who may have studied Greek medicine and came into direct contact with the Prophet was the physician Al-Harith bin Khalada. Bin Khalada was born in the middle of the 6th century in the tribe of Banu Thaqif in Taif. Some historians maintain that he received his medical education at the Yundisapur Medical School, where he learnt the teachings of Aristotle and Galen 111. According to these historians, the major link between Islamic and Greek medicine must be sought in late Sasanian medicine, especially in the school of Yundisapur, rather than that of Alexandria. At the time of the rise of Islam, Yundisapur was at its prime. It was the most important medical center of its time, combining the Greek, Indian and Iranian medical traditions in a cosmopolitan atmosphere which prepared the ground for Islamic medicine. 112. Following this narrative, some historians and commentators believe the Prophet plagiarized Aristotelian and Galenic accounts of the developing human embryo via bin Khalada, and sought medical advice from him. 113. This is unfounded for various reasons. 1. Claiming the Prophet sought medical advice from bin Khalada neither implies nor stipulates the fact that he copied bin Khalada's apparent knowledge of Hellenic embryology. The onus of proof is on the one who is making the claim. From a historical perspective, there is no direct and explicit evidence that indicates the Prophet manufactured his views on embryology via bin Khalada. 2. It is generally believed that bin Khalada graduated from the Persian medical school at Yundisapur. However, the existence of such a school has recently been questioned by a number of leading historians. For instance, the historian David C. Lindbergh in his book, The Beginnings of Western Science, highlights the legendary status of the school. An influential mythology has developed around Nestorian activity in the city of Gondisapur Yundisapur in southwestern Persia. According to the often repeated legend, the Nestorians turned Gondisapur into a major intellectual center by the 6th century, establishing what some enthusiasts have chosen to call a university, where instruction in all of the Greek disciplines could be obtained. It is alleged that Gondisapur had a medical school, with a curriculum based on Alexandrian textbooks, and a hospital modeled on Byzantine hospitals, which kept the realm supplied with physicians trained in Greek medicine. Of greatest importance, Gondisapur is held to have played a critical role in the translation of Greek scholarship into Near Eastern languages and, indeed, to have been the single most important channel by which Greek science passed to the Arabs. Recent research has revealed a considerably less dramatic reality. We have no persuasive evidence for the existence of a medical school or a hospital at Gondisapur, although there seems to have been a theological school and perhaps an attached infirmary. No doubt Gondisapur was the scene of serious intellectual endeavor, and a certain amount of medical practice. It supplied a string of physicians for the Abbasid court at Baghdad beginning in the 8th century, but it is doubtful that it ever became a major center of medical education or of translating activity. If the story of Gondisapur is unreliable in its details, the lesson it was meant to teach is nonetheless valid. 114. Roy Porter, a social historian of medicine, raises the contention about whether a medical school actually existed there. Porter in his book, The Greatest Benefit to Mankind, A Medical History of Humanity, writes, Yundisapur was certainly a meeting place for Arab, Greek, Syriac, and Jewish intellectuals, but there is no evidence that any medical academy existed there. Only in the early 9th century did Arab, Islamic learned medicine take shape. 115. According to the academic medic and historian Plinio Priorisci, there appears to be no evidence of a major medical school in either the 6th or 7th century. In his book, A History of Medicine, he brings to light that there are no Persian sources that substantiate the claim that Yundisapur played a significant role in the history of medicine. 116. It is also interesting to note that from the 5th to the 7th century, Yundisapur does not seem to have any other students that can be authenticated historically. This raises an important question: how is it that such a noted and reputable ancient academic institution has no known students? 3. Historians such as Manfred Ullmann and Franz Rosenthal are skeptical about the material referring to bin Khalada. They refer to him as a legendary figure, 117, which has literary allusions to characters of fictitious creation. Professor Gerald Hawting, in his essay, The Development of the Biography of Al-Harith ibn Khalada and the Relationship Between Medicine and Islam, writes, in these latter sources, the information about Al-Harith is fragmentary, references to his profession as a doctor are not consistent and, where they occur, tend to be incidental, and there seems to be little information about the nature of his medicine or detail about his life. 118. From this perspective, using unreliable or inconclusive historical narratives concerning bin Khalada's profession as a doctor, serve to weaken the argument that the Prophet copied the 7th century physician. 4. There are historical reports stating that bin Khalada converted to Islam and was considered a companion of the Prophet. Ethnographer and linguist, William Bryce, in his book An Historical Atlas of Islam, writes, he was converted to Islam and had acquired the status of one of the Prophet's companions. 119. Lecturer and novelist, Abu Bakr Asadullah expresses a similar position. According to nearly all traditional sources, the first known Arab physician was Al-Harith ibn Khalada, a graduate of Yundisapur and a Jewish convert to Islam, a contemporary of Prophet Muhammad. 120. In light of this, the Prophet copying bin Khalada is highly improbable, as it is irrational to assert that an educated physician would convert to Islam and follow the Prophet's message, had he known or suspected the Prophet of copying his work on embryology. However, it must be noted that there is uncertainty as to whether bin Khalada embraced Islam, and reports relating to his conversion are not authentic. 121. 5. The traditional sources that elaborate on bin Khalada also convey information relating to the Prophet, including his miracles and the supernatural eloquence of the Quranic discourse. One of these sources is Tariq al-Rusul Wal Muluk. 122. It underlines various aspects of the life and character of the Prophet, including his truthfulness. Since this source is used for sound historical information, insight, and as a point of reference on bin Khalada, reason necessitates that it also be viewed as reliable with regard to its discussion on the unquestionable integrity of the Prophet. Therefore, to accept the historical sources that elaborate on bin Khalada would be tantamount to agreeing that Prophet was truthful, thereby undermining any claim of copying and plagiarism. Instead, contentions of this nature raise questions about the impartiality and objectivity of the contender. 6. Bin Khalada was from Al-Ta'if, a town which came into contact with Islam only in the 8th year of the Islamic calendar, and it was during this period that Islamic historical sources first mention the physician. Therefore, it would be absurd to suggest the Prophet Muhammad copied bin Khalada's views on the developing human, because chapter 23 of the Qur'an and its verses referring to embryology had already been revealed by the time bin Khalada met the Prophet 123. 7. The link between bin Khalada and the Hellenic tradition is doubted by historians. Gerald Hawting explains that due to the scientific tradition in the Golden Age, historians and biographers of the time sought links to established institutions such as Undisapur, to associate Islam with the science of the day. In this context, Hawting sees a motive for the elaboration of the links of Al-Harith ibn Khalada with Persia and its Hellenistic tradition. 124. 8. Even if the historical reports concerning bin Khalada's role as a physician are assumed to be accurate and valid, his medical practice raises serious doubt as to whether he learned or adopted Hellenic medicine. Historians and relevant reports concerning bin Khalada clearly describe his approach and practice of medicine as folkloric and of the Bedouin type. 4. Instance, in one report when bin Khalada treated Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqtas, the treatment that bin Khalada prescribed was a drink mixture made up of dates, grain and fat. This treatment is reflective of the medical ideas and treatments of the Prophet, and not of Hellenic medicine. 125. In view of the above discussion, whether bin Khalada had any formal link to Galenic and Aristotelian views on the development of the human embryo remains inconclusive, and so adopting the plagiarism thesis via bin Khalada does not carry much weight. Additionally, the historical narratives concerning bin Khalada are conflicting, speculative, doubtful and untenable. Therefore, to use bin Khalada as a valid link connecting the Prophet and Hellenic medicine is baseless. For a lengthy discussion on this topic, please refer to Khalid al-Hazaraji's and Elias Karim's essay, Was Al-Harith bin Khalada the source of the Prophets? Medical Knowledge. 126. Hellenic medicine was known, adopted and utilized by Arabian, or Arabic-speaking, society in the early 7th century. Commentators assert that Hellenic embryology was common in early 7th century Arabic-speaking society. This view is based on the assertion that there were cultural exchanges between the Greeks, Romans and Arabs. Cultural exchanges did occur, and its beginnings predate the advent of Islam. However, it doesn't logically follow that it included Hellenic views on embryology, or that Hellenic medicine was popularized and disseminated throughout the region. To maintain such a claim is untenable, as it would imply that there is historical evidence to show that Hellenic embryology was transferred or learned via these cultural exchanges. The following points comprehensively highlight that Hellenic embryology was not transferred or learned via Greco-Arab cultural exchanges. 1. The Prophet Muhammad could not have acquired knowledge of Hellenic embryology via written works. The first major translations of Hellenic embryology into Arabic began at least 150 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. As Roy Porter in his book, The Greatest Benefit to Mankind, A Medical History of Humanity from Antiquity to the Present, writes, only in the early 9th century did Arab Islamic learned medicine take shape. The first phase of this revival lay in a major translation movement, arising during the reign of Harun al-Rashid, r. 786–809, and gaining impetus in the caliphate of his son, al-Ma'mun r. 813–33. It was stimulated by a socio-economic atmosphere favorable to the pursuit of scholarship, a perceived need among both Muslims and Christians for access in Arabic to ancient medicine, and the ready availability for the relevant arts. 127. Crucial in this age of translations was the establishment in Baghdad, capital of the Islamic Empire under the Abbasid caliphs, of the Bayt al-Hikmah, 832, a center where scholars assembled texts and translated into Arabic a broad range of non-Islamic works. The initial translation work was dominated by Christians, thanks to their skills in Greek and Syriac. The main figure was Hunan ibn Ishaq, d. 873, later known in the West as Johannidius, a Nestorian Christian. From the southern Iraqi town of Al-Hira with his pupils, he translated 129 works of Galen into Arabic, and others into Syriac, providing the Arabic world with more Galenic texts than survive today in Greek. 128. According to the historian of medicine Donald Campbell, the earliest possible translation of Greek medicine was done at least 50 years after the death of the prophet by the Syrian Jew Mazar Jawai. John the grammarian and Aaron the presbyter, who was also an Alexandrian, lived at the time of Mohammed, c. 622. Aaron compiled 30 books in Syriac, the material for which was derived chiefly from the Greek. These books were called the Pandects of Aaron and were said to have been translated into Arabic c. 683 by the Syrian Jew Masr Jawai. This is of interest as it is the first definite attempt at the transmutation of the medicine of the Greeks into that of the Arabians. 129. A note on the 6th century Syriac and Latin translations. Other possible means of knowledge transfer would include non-Arabic texts, such as the Syriac and Latin translations of Galen's books. However, the Prophet Muhammad did not know Syriac or Latin. Therefore, this idea is implausible. Also, the Prophet could not have been taught Hellenic embryology via someone who had learned via these translations, as there is no evidence that he came into direct contact with anyone who had studied Greek medicine, as highlighted in the above discussion on Al-Harith bin Khalada. Significantly, historians maintain that there is no evidence of any acquisition of Hellenic medical knowledge before the beginning of the 8th century, and that it was only through double translation, from Greek into Syriac, and from Syriac into Arabic, that the Arabs first became acquainted with the works of the Greeks. The historian John Meyendorff, in his paper Byzantine Views of Islam, highlights the points raised above. Until the end of the Umayyad period, these Syrian or Coptic Christians were the chief, and practically the only, spokesman for the Christian faith in the Caliphate. And it was through the intermediary of these communities, and often by means of a double translation from Greek into Syriac, and from Syriac into Arabic, that the Arabs first became acquainted with the works of Aristotle, Plato, Galen, Hippocrates, and Plotinus. 130. Since the first Arabic translations of Hellenic medicine appeared at least 50 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the view that he somehow had access to the Syriac translations is unfounded, because it was through these double translations that the Arabs first became acquainted with Hellenic medicine. Further separating the Prophet and the Syriac and Latin translations is the lack of any positive or cogent answers to the following questions. If the knowledge contained in these translations informed common knowledge, then why are there no oral or written reports concerning knowledge of Hellenic embryology? See, the Prophet Muhammad could not have acquired Hellenic embryology from 7th century Arabian common knowledge. Why are the Quranic verses that elaborate on the developing human dissimilar to Hellenic embryology? See our Hellenic and Quranic views on embryology. Similar. The historical evidence strongly suggests that Hellenic embryology was not known in early 7th century Arabic-speaking society. In this context, the contention assumes the Prophet was the only person who came into contact with the Syriac or Latin translations. This inevitable conclusion is irrational and conspiratorial, especially in a 7th century Arabian context, because many people would travel to regions where Syriac and Latin were spoken. Therefore, to claim the Prophet was the only one who somehow gained knowledge via these translations, even though Hellenic embryology was not common knowledge. See point 3 below. The Prophet Muhammad could not have acquired Hellenic embryology from 7th century Arabian common knowledge below, raises far more problems than it solves. 2. The Prophet Muhammad could not have been influenced by popular medical practice with a supposedly Hellenic flavor. There is no direct historical evidence indicating that Hellenic medical practices were utilized or known in early 7th century Arabic-speaking society. As Roy Porter highlights, only in the early 9th century did Arab Islamic learned medicine take shape. Supporting this view, Donald Campbell explains that Arab physicians were brought into high repute by the early part of the 8th century as a result of studying Greek medicine. 131. Further distancing Hellenic medical practice from early 7th century Arabic-speaking society. Ibn Khaldun classifies popularized medicine during the 7th century as Arab folk medicine. Civilized Bedouins have a kind of medicine which is mainly based upon individual experience. They inherit its use from the sheikhs and old women of the tribe. Some of it may occasionally be correct. However, that kind of medicine is not based upon any natural norm or upon any conformity of the treatment to temper the humors. Much of this sort of medicine existed among the Arabs. They had well-known physicians, such as Al-Harith b. Khalada and others. The medicine mentioned in religious tradition is of the Bedouin type. 132. Supporting Ibn Khaldun's views, the historian of medicine, Plinio Priorisci, confirms that 7th century Arabian popularized medicine did not reflect Hellenic medicine. From the pre-Islamic to the early Islamic period, there were no significant changes in the practice of medicine in these documents. We find that such medicine continued to be practiced for some time. Camel urine and milk were common remedies, various vegetable products, for example henna, olive oil, and other animal products, for example sheep fat, honey, were also considered effective. 133. The historian Vivian Nutton in her essay, The Rise of Medicine, explains how the Arabs had their own distinct medicine, which further supports the claim that the Arabs did not utilize or adopt Hellenic medicine until after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. The Arab conquests of the 7th century crafted a new political order onto a basically Christian, Syriac-speaking society. Although the Arabs had their own medicine, based on herbs and chants, they were not numerous enough to impose it on their new subjects. 134. A contention against this position maintains that early 7th century Arabs had practices of cupping, which was a Hellenic practice, and therefore Hellenic medical practices were transferred from the Greeks to the Arabs. There is no direct evidence to justify this claim. Just because some medical practices were similar, it doesn't imply that they exchanged this practice. One can argue that it could have been the Chinese, as they also practiced cupping. Even if some of these practices were as a result of direct cultural exchanges, it doesn't logically follow that Hellenic views on embryology were also transferred. Knowledge of Hellenic embryology and emulating medical practice are not the same. Where medical practices may be adopted, as they are not complicated, details about the development of a human embryo would require education, usually at an academic institution. This is proved by the fact that by 531 CE, in Alexandria, Hellenic texts formed the basis for the Alexandrian medical curriculum. 135. In light of this, there is no substantial historical evidence that the Prophet Muhammad interacted with anyone who learned Hellenic embryology from a medical academic institution. 3. The Prophet Muhammad could not have acquired Hellenic embryology from 7th century Arabian common knowledge. An interesting view adopted by various commentators includes highlighting the difference between practice and knowledge. For instance, a culture X may have knowledge of medical practices Y yet continue to practice their own medicine. Modern African cultures are good examples to substantiate this view. For instance, there are some cultures in Africa that are aware of germ theory and the use of antibiotics, but still persist on the practice of witchcraft and magic. 136 In similar light, society in early 7th century Arabia could have had knowledge of Hellenic embryology but practiced its own distinct Bedouin medicine. However, there is a striking difference between the two situations. There is evidence to show that African cultures have knowledge of germ theory and Western medicine, but there is no evidence to show that early 7th century Arabian society had knowledge of Hellenic embryology. 2. Assert such a view would be to argue from ignorance. Even if the assertion is taken seriously, more questions arise that undermine the argument. For example, why is there no evidence to show that there was knowledge of Hellenic embryology, and why are there no pre-Islamic traditions that indicate an early 7th century knowledge of the science? Continuing with the above questions, an understanding of the Arabs' well-developed oral traditions serve as a means to dismantle the assertion that Hellenic medicine was known, popularized, adopted and utilized during the life of the Prophet Muhammad. The Arabs had made poetry and the transmissions of oral traditions as the means to transfer knowledge, such as stories of the famous pre-Islamic wars, ethics and current affairs. In light of this, there is no evidence of any oral tradition elaborating or even briefly mentioning Hellenic views on embryology. Muhammad Salim Khan in his book, Islamic Medicine, explains this significant point. The pre-Islamic Arabs were familiar with the working of the major internal organs, although only in general. Surgical knowledge and practices were limited to cauterization, branding and cupping. The care of the sick was the responsibility of the women. There is no evidence of any oral or written treatise on any aspect of medicine. There was use of folk medicine, which has interesting connections with magic. It is also interesting to note that pre-Islamic Arabia had contacts with ancient Egypt, Greece, Persia and India, where medicine was highly developed, but there is no material to suggest that it was adopted or utilized by ancient Arabs. This is particularly surprising in view of the fact that the ancient Arabs were well developed in their poetry. 137. Was the Prophet Muhammad a liar? Early historical sources on the Prophet Muhammad's life illustrate and emphasize the integrity of his character. He was not a liar, and to assert as much is indefensible. The presumption that he plagiarized Hellenic embryology, while maintaining the Qur'an to be the Word of God, is inconceivable. There are various reasons for this. For instance, he was known even by the enemies to his message as the trustworthy. 138. Further proof of the Prophet's reliability and credibility is enforced and substantiated by the fact that a liar usually lies for some worldly gain, but the Prophet rejected all worldly aspirations and suffered tremendously for his message. 139. He rejected the riches and power he was offered to stop promulgating his message. Significantly, he was persecuted for his beliefs, boycotted and exiled from his beloved city, Mecca, starved of food, and stoned by children to the point where his blood drenched his legs. His wife passed away and his beloved companions were tortured and persecuted. 140. The psychological profile of the Prophet is obviously incongruent with a liar, and to maintain that he was dishonest is tantamount to making bold claims without any evidence. The late Emeritus Professor in Arabic and Islamic Studies W. Montgomery Watt in Muhammad at Mecca explores this. His readiness to undergo persecution for his beliefs, the high moral character of the men who believed in him and looked up to him as a leader, and the greatness of his ultimate achievement, all argue his Fundamental integrity. To suppose Muhammad an impostor raises more problems than it solves. 141. It was the Prophet's truthfulness that was a key cause of his success on both political and religious levels. Without his trustworthiness, which was an integral part of his moral behavior, he could not have achieved so much in a relatively short space of time. This view is addressed by the historians Edward Gibbon and Simon Oakley in History of the Saracen Empire. The greatest success of Muhammad's life was effected by sheer moral force. 142. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Critics argue that the discussion thus far points towards an absence of evidence, and an absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. This claim asserts that even if there is lack of evidence that Hellenic embryology was common knowledge, it still does not prove that knowledge of the subject was absent from early 7th century Arabic-speaking society. As ever, this understanding of the above discussion is flawed. The discussion so far has presented a strong case showing that Hellenic embryology did not form part of early 7th century Arabian society's common knowledge. If it was common, it would most likely to have been recorded in the oral traditions, the written treatises, the medical practices and the historical narratives of the time. For these reasons, the claim that Hellenic embryology was common knowledge is highly unlikely. Therefore, to prolong this claim is irrational and conspiratorial. Are Hellenic and Quranic views on embryology similar? 1. Aristotle and the Qur'an. The accusation that the Qur'an is similar to Aristotelian views on human embryology is untenable for various reasons. Firstly, Aristotle believed only the male produces fluid responsible for the development of the embryo, the genetic material. In his book on the generation of animals, he supposes the male semen to be the active form and the female ovum as providing only the passive element for fertilization, an idea contradictory to modern embryology. In fact, Aristotle was of the opinion that semen mixed with women's menstrual blood, coagulating to form the embryo. Aristotelian accounts of human development are evidently incongruous with both the Qur'an and modern embryology, as illustrated in his own writings. The female, though it does not contribute any semen to generation, contributes something, viz., the substance constituting the menstrual fluid. If the male is the active partner, the one which originates the movement, and the female qua female is the passive one, surely what the female contributes to the semen of the male will be not semen but material. And this is in fact what we find happening, for the natural substance of the menstrual fluid is to be classed as prime matter. 143. Classical exegetes of the Qur'an convey the disagreement between Aristotelian accounts of human development and the Quranic narrative. The Qur'an describes the nutfa as a mingled substance from both the male and the female, not just the male. It also stresses both the male and female as being responsible for the child's genetic makeup. Ibn al-Qayyim, the 14th century jurist and commentator of the Qur'an, uses various prophetic traditions to emphasize the fact that male semen alone is not responsible for generating a child. 144. Ibn al-Qayyim theorizes that if women do not have a type of semen, then their children would not look like them. The male semen alone does not generate a child because conception only occurs upon the mixture of male sperm with another equivalent, ovum, from the female. 145. Furthermore, assertions of plagiarism are futile as the words used in the Qur'an are unlike Aristotle's choice of words. The Qur'an is scientifically accurate and Aristotle is not. Aristotle's discredited supposition of menstrual blood being involved in the process of fertilization is further contrasted with the Qur'an and its use of the word nutfa, which is not the word for menstrual blood in Arabic. The word for menstrual blood in Arabic is hayd. 146. Secondly, Aristotelian views on human development include that male embryos are generated on the left side of the womb, and female embryos on the right side of the womb. 147. This is a concept that the Qur'an does not mention. Thirdly, Aristotle held the belief that the upper body is formed before the lower body. Now the upper portion of the body is the first to be marked off in the course of the embryo's formation, the lower portion receives its growth as time goes on. 148. Again, this idea does not exist in the Qur'an. A contention to the above response includes the assertion that the Prophet Muhammad plagiarized the following passage from the Aristotle. Round about the bones, and attached to them by thin fibrous brands, grow fleshy parts, for the sake of which the bones exist. 149. This seems to correlate with the Quranic statement, "Then we clothed the bones with flesh." In response to this, an interesting and significant deduction can be made upon considering the similarities between both statements. Rather than negate the authenticity of the Qur'an, the similarities serve to dismantle the claim that the Prophet copied Aristotle. 4. Example: how could the Prophet take the correct information from Aristotle and, at the same time, reject the incorrect information? Also, how could the Prophet include other aspects of the developing human embryo, which are not mentioned in Aristotelian literature, but yet correspond with modern embryology? The only rational deduction to these observations is to assert that the Qur'an did not borrow or copy from Aristotelian embryology. To oppose this would be tantamount to claiming that the Prophet knew what was correct, understood what was incorrect, and had knowledge that transcended the early 7th century understanding of human development. 2. Galen and the Qur'an. To substantiate the view that the Quranic accounts of the developing human are similar to Hellenic embryology, commentators have attempted to compare the Quranic stages of human development with Galenic views on the subject. However, upon analyzing Galen's writings, and contrasting it with the various and extensive meanings of the Nufta, Alaka, and Mudga stages, there are considerable differences to be found. First stage. In his book, On Semen, Galen states, "But let us take the account back again to the first conformation of the animal, and in order to make our account orderly and clear, let us divide the creation of the fetus overall into 4 periods of time. The first is that in which, as is seen both in abortions and in dissection, the form of the semen prevails. At this time, Hippocrates too, the all-marvelous, does not yet call the conformation of the animal a fetus. As we heard just now in the case of semen voided in the 6th day, he still calls it semen. 150. Galen clearly states that his views are as a result of dissections and abortions, and then goes on to explain that the first stage of human development is in the form of sp. Et. The word sp. Et. Spermatos, in the Greek language means sperm. 151. However, this understanding of the word was only realized in the 17th century. 152. In the 2nd century, which was the period of Galen's writings, the word sp. Et. meant semen. So from a Galenic perspective, this stage is merely describing what can be seen with the naked eye, which is a semen-like substance. This raises a significant contention: if the Qur'an was a summary of Galenic views on embryology, then the Arabic word that should have been used to represent this understanding is mani or maniyan. As previously discussed, the reason for this is that in the prophetic traditions, when describing semen in context of its appearance and form, the words mani and maniyan are used. These words are consistently used throughout the prophetic traditions. Further widening the gap between Galenic and Quranic terminology is the use of the word maniyan elsewhere in the Qur'an. The Qur'an mentions the word maniyan, the genitive case of maniyan, in the context of the physical form and appearance of an emitted substance. This word is also used in conjunction with the word nutfa, which clearly shows how the two words are not referring to the same thing, because the nutfa, according to the Qur'an, comes from the maniyan, semen. Had he not been a sperm, nutfa, from a semen, maniyan, emitted 153. As previously explored, see drop of fluid. This perspective on nutfa highlights how the intended use of this word is not to portray the meaning of semen. Rather, it is a drop or a substance from semen. In another verse, the Qur'an explains how the human being is made. From an extract, sulala, of a liquid disdained, semen. 154. The word sulala means an extract, something drawn out or the most subtle, purest and essential constituent. This shows that the intended use of the word nutfa is not as a synonym for semen. Rather, it is a drop containing an extract from the semen, and the female equivalent, containing essential substances like a sperm or egg. Even if the view that nutfa is just a drop of semen, the context of the prophetic traditions and the Qur'an clearly show that nutfa is used for the process of fertilization and the development of the human being, and mani or maniyan is used in the context of the physical form of the emitted substance. Nevertheless, the Quranic view still highlights that the nutfa is different from mani, because the Qur'an mentions that it is a drop of semen of which is an extract. This indicates that the nutfa is a pure, subtle or essential part of the semen, and not the whole semen itself. It is worth noting that Galen adopted the view that the semen came from blood. Galen writes, "An artery and a vein are observed to go to each of the testicles, not in a straight path, as they do all other parts, but twisting first in many shapes, like grape tendrils or ivy. And in these many twists that they make before reaching the testicles you can see the blood gradually growing white. And finally, when the vessel has now reached the testicle, the substance of the semen is clearly visible in it, but they generated it from blood, which spent a great deal of time in them, for this is the use of the twisting. And as they altered the quality of the blood, they changed it to semen." 155. Galen also asserts that semen from both the male and female mix with menstrual blood. In his book on semen, he dedicates a whole section on disagreeing with the Aristotelian position that the male semen mixes with menstrual blood, and articulates a case for the mother contributing semen as well as menstrual blood to form the fetus. 156. Galen concludes that the formation of the fetus arises from the two semens mixing with the subsequent involvement of the menstrual blood. 157. The above ideas and processes are not mentioned in the Qur'an. The Quranic narrative explicitly states that the nutfa and alaka stages are distinct and separate, and at no point does the Qur'an mention that the nutfa comes from the alaka, and then subsequently mixes with the alaka, again, to form the human fetus. This clearly undercuts any claim that the Qur'an is similar to Hellenic embryology. However, some commentators assert that the nutfa and alaka stages are a summary of Galen's above inaccuracies. Their main point is that the Qur'an mentions fakalakna nutfata alakan, which means and then we created the drop into a clinging form. They propose that the words fakalakna can mean to mix or to combine, and therefore are a representation of the Hellenic idea of the semen subsequently mixing with blood. They further stipulate that this assertion is supported by the fact that nutfa can mean semen and alaka can mean blood in a general sense. This assertion displays a clear misunderstanding of the Arabic language for the following reasons. 1. As previously discussed, the Quranic use of the word nutfa does not mean semen, especially in the Hellenic context. 2. The Qur'an mentions that the nutfa and alaka stages are distinct, and that the stages of the developing human embryo are discrete and separate, inasmuch as they do not mix or combine. This is understood by the use of the keyword, kalakna, which means we made it become 158, indicating that each stage is different and separate from one another. 3. The keyword kalakna does not carry the additional meanings of to mix and to combine, so the assertion that the Qur'an borrowed this knowledge is false, because the divine book clearly mentions each stage as distinct and separate as opposed to the Hellenic understanding of semen and blood mixing. In light of the above, if chapter 23 of the Qur'an was just a summary of Hellenic embryology, why did it not use the Arabic word for semen, maniyan, to refer to sp. et? Since this Greek word was also used in the context of the physical form and appearance of the fluid. Significantly, why does the Qur'an refer to the nutfa as being a special part or extract of semen, maniyan, which clearly indicates that they are not referring to the same thing? The use of the two words clearly shows that there are two different meanings being portrayed. The different choice of words to describe sexual emissions, fluids and cells in varying contexts further highlights that the Qur'an, and by extension the Prophet Muhammad, did not plagiarize Hellenic embryology, because if they did, then maniyan and nutfa would be referring to the same substance. Also, why did the Qur'an not mention that the nutfa comes from blood, like the Hellenic view? Why did the Qur'an not mention that the nutfa combined with menstrual blood to create the human fetus? These questions clearly distance the Qur'an and the Prophet from the accusation that they borrowed Hellenic views on embryology. Therefore, once the original context and language of the source texts in question are analyzed, it can be concluded that they are not identical or even suspiciously similar. Second stage. But when it has been filled with blood, and heart, brain and liver are still unarticulated and unshaped yet have by now a certain solidarity and considerable size, this is the second period. The substance of the fetus has the form of flesh and no longer the form of semen. Accordingly you would find that Hippocrates too no longer calls such a form semen but, as was said, fetus 159. Another significant contention concerns Galen's second stage that refers to the embryo as being filled with blood. The key Greek words used are plero, which means filled 160 and it, matos, meaning blood 161. If the Qur'an borrowed Hellenic views on the developing human embryo, the words that should have been used are malat, which means the manner in which something is filled 162, and dam, which means blood 163. However, the word alaka is used in the Qur'an. This word in the context of blood can mean blood in a general sense, and a clot of blood due to its sticking together 164. Conversely, the word alaka alone would not represent the Hellenic stage here, because its meanings do not encapsulate the word filled and its use to mean blood clot would be misplaced as the word for blood clot in Greek is not it. Rather it is thrombos, which is a word Galen does not use 165 even if commentators assert that the use of the word alaka as a blood clot in this context is satisfactory. An explanation is required to reconcile the fact that it only means blood clot in the sense that it clings. This is made clear in Lane's Arabic English lexicon and in Ibn Kathir's Quranic exegesis. Ibn Kathir explains the word alaka to mean a dangling clot 166 and Lane's Arabic lexicon clarifies that it means a blood clot because of its clinging together 167, rather than its physical appearance. Therefore, using the Arabic words and would have been more appropriate, because Galen specifically refers to filled with blood and not just blood. This whole discussion has to be understood in the context of the primary meaning for the word alaka, which is not blood or blood clot but rather to hang or to be suspended. For that reason, the claim that the Qur'an reflects Hellenic embryology is weak and unsubstantiated. even though there are opinions of classical linguists that indicate that the word alaika can mean a blood clot in its true sense. The plagiarism thesis breaks down when a more contextual understanding of Hellenic embryology is taken into consideration. At this second stage, Galen uses the word saed, sarkaoe this, meaning fleshy, 168 to refer to the appearance of the embryo. This undermines the claim that the Quranic stages are similar to Galen, because words that can mean fleshy in Arabic, such as mudga and lam, are used to describe later stages. However, Galen mentions this stage as a fleshy substance filled with blood. The word in the Qur'an used to describe this stage doesn't encompass such a meaning, because alaika, if we assume it to mean blood or blood clot, does not encompass a fleshy substance filled with blood. To illustrate this further, imagine someone had to summarize the following statement into Arabic: a blood-filled substance that is fleshy. What words must they use to best represent the meaning of the statement? An array of words from the classical Arabic would be used like the words mentioned above, but alaika would not be one of them. Third stage. The third period follows on this, when, as was said, it is possible to see the three ruling parts clearly in a kind of outline, a silhouette, as it were, of all the other parts. You will see the conformation of the three ruling parts more clearly, that of the parts of the stomach more dimly, and much more still, that of the limbs. Later on they form twigs, as Hippocrates expressed it, indicating by the term their similarity to branches 169. As explored, the Qur'an mentions mudga as a chewed-like substance and a small piece of flesh. In contrast, Galen discusses the conformation of the three ruling parts, silhouettes and twigs, which is most likely in reference to limb bone formation. He details these three ruling parts as being more visible than the stomach and the limbs. However, the Qur'an makes no mention of this, and its mention of limb formation comes at the next stage. It is both implausible and impractical, therefore, to suggest that the Qur'an copied the works of Galen, as it does not include any of the descriptions provided by Galen at this stage. Also, the word mudga would have been appropriately used as a summary of the ancient Greek word embryon, 170, which means the flesh of an embryo. However, Galen did not use this word. The following hypothetical scenario highlights the absurdity of asserting similarity between the Quranic and Hellenic descriptions of this stage. If someone had become acquainted with Hellenic embryology and had to summarize his third stage, would the word mudga accurately encompass the meaning of the three ruling parts, silhouettes and limbs? The answer is no. This conclusion is also supported by the fact that there is no mention of flesh, a small piece of meat or something that has been bitten, in the original Greek of Galen's writings describing this stage. A conservative approach to the above question would at least conclude that there was a serious misreading or misunderstanding of the text. Even if that were the case, it would still highlight that Hellenic and Quranic terms are dissimilar, and it would raise the need for evidence to establish a misreading or misunderstanding. In light of the evidence provided in this section, it is extremely unlikely that there was any common knowledge of Hellenic embryology, written or oral, in early 7th century Arabia. Early Greek translations of the Qur'an, 9th century Greek translations of the Qur'an undermine the view that Hellenic and Quranic embryology are similar. Early Greek translations of the Qur'an clearly show how the Quranic terms used to describe the development of the human embryo are not the same as Hellenic terms. For instance, Nicetas of Byzantium, who was one of the most influential Byzantine theologians who wrote against Islam, comments on 9th century translations of the Qur'an 171 concerning the word alaika. Nicetas maintains that the Quranic usage of the Word implies that man was created from a leech. He says that man was created from a leech. D. 172. The key word that Nicetas refers to in the Greek translation is d. Vitalis, which means leech. 173. In view of the fact that the early Greek translation of the Qur'an does not use Hellenic terminology to understand the text, and that the early Greek understanding of Aleka meant leech, strengthens the argument against the contention that Hellenic and Quranic views on embryology are similar. This is further supported by the fact that Nicetas' writings and commentary on the Qur'an are polemic in nature. 174. Nicetas wanted to undermine Islam, and attempted to do so by refuting the Quranic discourse. 175. This brings to light a question that weakens the plagiarism thesis. If Quranic and Hellenic views on embryology were similar, why did not Nicetas expose the similarity to show that the Prophet Muhammad borrowed Hellenic views on embryology? The absence of Nicetas' attempt to link Quranic views on embryology with Hellenic medicine clearly shows how an early Greek understanding of the Qur'an was not perceived to be the result of borrowed Hellenic medical knowledge. It is also interesting to note that Nicetas' work on the Qur'an was used as a reference for anti-Islamic polemics for over 500 years. 176. Which highlights that the plagiarism thesis is a relatively modern innovation in the field of anti-Islamic polemics, and brings to light the fact its allegations are based on misunderstandings of the culture of the time, including a superficial understanding of the Greek and Arabic language. Other historical documents that can be traced back to the Byzantine period are anathemas recorded during Muslim conversions to Christianity. For example, the following ritual was used during conversions to Christianity. I anathematize Muhammad's teaching about the creation of man, where he says that man was created from dust and a drop of fluid, sta, and leeches d, and chewed-like substance, as it. 177. The keywords used here are sta. Sta go nos, which means a drop. 178, d. Vital. Lawn, which means leech. 179, and as it. Masimatos, which means something that has been chewed. 180. This clearly indicates that an early Greek understanding of the Qur'an does not correspond to Hellenic views on embryology. This is due to the fact that Galen never used the Greek words mentioned above. A key disagreement to the above argument involves commentators asserting that the 9th century Greek translation is inaccurate. Although a legitimate contention, it is incorrect. The 9th century translation seems to be a high-quality translation, as the historian Christian Hogel writes. Whoever produced the translation, and more than one person may well have been involved in the process, it should be stressed that, despite the mentioned linguistic features that may seem to point to a humble origin, it is actually of high quality. The person, or persons, completing the task knew Arabic and Greek well, and a high degree of precision and consistency was aimed at and normally achieved. 181. This view is also supported by the academic historian Christos Similides. He writes, the 9th century Greek translation of the Qur'an, although not without mistakes, is generally accurate, and evidently the translator consulted both lexicographical and exegetically material. 182. The similarities between Hellenic embryology and the Qur'an. A contention to the above analysis is the fact that there are still some similarities between Hellenic embryology and the Quranic narrative. These similarities include the fact that both the Qur'an and Hellenic views understood that semen came from both the mother and the father. In response to this, it must be noted that in light of the above evidence, this contention is irrational. To assert that the Qur'an borrowed Hellenic embryology in light of the striking differences discussed above, is tantamount to claiming that evolution and creationism are similar because they address the same field of science. Many questions are raised that belittle this contention, such as, how could the Qur'an, and by extension the Prophet Muhammad, have known what was right, dismissed what was wrong and ensured that the whole Quranic narrative on the development of the human embryo was congruent with reality. Medieval Arabic medical texts and Hellenic stages. In light of the above discussion, critics argue that medieval Arabic medical texts appreciated the agreement between the Qur'an and Galen, and these texts adopted some Quranic terms to describe Hellenic stages. These texts include Ibn Sina's Kitab al-Qanun fi al-Tab and Ibn Abbas Kamal al-Sina al-Tabiyya. In response to this criticism, there are a few points to consider. Firstly, Hellenic medicine was perceived to be the science of the time, therefore it is obvious that a believing scientist would want to marry scientific truths with divine truths. Secondly, claiming an agreement between the Qur'an and Galen does not mean that they do agree. This is merely an opinion of a Muslim scientist or medic who is driven by the desire to reconcile the science of the day with his belief in the Qur'an. If these medics and scientists were alive today, they would have probably dissociated the Qur'an from inaccurate Hellenic embryology. Thirdly, the analysis above has provided a strong case against the claim that the Qur'an's and Galen's views on the developing human embryo are similar. Fourthly, if Quranic and Hellenic embryology are in agreement, then how did the Qur'an, and by extension the Prophet Muhammad, not include the inaccurate descriptions and ideas provided by Galen? How did the Prophet know that Galen's view of the formation of semen from blood was inaccurate? How did he know that Galen's view that semen does not mix with blood to form the embryo was wrong? And, why do many of the Arabic terms used in the Qur'an not capture the meaning of the Greek terms used by Galen? In light of these questions, the argument that medieval Arabic medical texts declare an agreement between Galen and the Qur'an, as a means to highlight similarity and plagiarism of Hellenic embryology, is baseless and unfounded. Did the Prophet dissect human and animal embryos? Critics allege that the Prophet Muhammad dissected or examined human and animal embryos, and therefore this serves as an explanation of the scientific knowledge contained in the Qur'an. An immediate refutation of this allegation is that many of the stages described in the Qur'an cannot be seen with the naked eye but require optical aids, examples of which include the Nutfa stage and the Alaka stage. Yet another poignant reason invalidating this is the impracticalness and counterproductivity of the Prophet spending his time examining embryos, when his proclaimed mission was to spread the message of Islam. These particular verses, that is, the verses detailing the development of the embryo, did not, and would have been unlikely to, affect the essence or propagation of Islam, especially in a 7th century Arabian context where such deep understandings of embryology was improbable. Finally, why aren't there any records of the Prophet dissecting animal or human embryos? Such a claim does not tally with the life and mission of the Prophet Muhammad. Is the Qur'an inaccurate concerning where sperm comes from? So let man observe from what he was created. He was created from a fluid, ejected, emerging from between the backbone and the ribs. 183. The above verses have been condemned by various critics and commentators as being scientifically inaccurate, and any attempt to salvage an accurate meaning from them has been suggested to be tantamount to textual acrobatics. This evaluation arises from an analysis of the words sulb and tera-ib, which have been translated to C2, IERA, design, embryology, diagrams, figure 9 JPG. Mean backbone and ribs. Those who maintain the scientific inaccuracy of the Qur'an claim the above translation for the words sulb and tera-ib cannot be reconciled with modern developments in physiology. However, after a lexical analysis of these words it will be seen that these words do in fact concur with modern physiology. The word, sulb, carries various meanings including hard, firm, solid, stiff and rigid. It also means any portion of the backbone, particularly the lumbar portion and the loins. It is specific to males 184-185. The word, tera'ib, means breastbone, the ribs 186 or the pelvic arch, 187, and this word according to most authors refers specifically to women. With such examinations of the interpretations offered by the Arabic language, it can be inferred that the Qur'an complies with modern physiology, as it is well known that the sperm and semen come from an area referred to as the loins, and the ovum comes from the pelvic arch area, both of which are required for the creation of man, that is to say, the human being. Even if the above analysis is dismissed, the verse in question would still be scientifically accurate. Modern physiology states that semen is made up various fluids. For instance, semen is made up of sperm which comes from the testes and makes up 2 to 5% its content. Fluid from the seminal vesicles make up 65 to 75% of semen, and fluid from the prostrate makes up 25 to 30% of the male sexual fluid. Also, semen is made up of fluid from the bulbourethral glands which makes up less than 1% of the semen. According to modern physiology, the main source of the semen is the fluid from the seminal vesicles, and these vesicles are situated between the lower backbone and the ribs. See Figure 9. Figure 9. Notice how the seminal vesicle is between the backbone and the ribs. Do the prophetic traditions undermine the scientific accuracy of the Qur'an? Prophetic traditions that clarify and elucidate the Quranic view on the developing human embryo correspond with modern embryology. There are a myriad of traditions that substantiate this claim. Gender determination. The following tradition on gender determination highlights how the prophetic traditions are in line with scientific developments. The angel is sent to the nutfa after it has settled in the uterus for 40 or 45 nights and says, "Lord, is it to be wretched or happy?" Then this is inscribed. Then he says, "Lord, is it to be male or female?" 188. During the 6th week of the developing embryo, the primary sex chords are finger-like projections. At this time both the male and female gonads appear identical. However, just after the 6th week a significant event occurs that determines the physical expression of the embryo's genetic makeup. This event is the activation of genes that stimulates the production of male and female hormones. If the Y chromosome is present in the embryo's cell, a gene within the short arm of the chromosome called SRY will turn on, initiating a chemical chain reaction that will turn on other genes and stimulate the production of male hormones. If the X chromosome is present, or if the SRY gene is missing from the Y chromosome, the embryo will develop into a female via mechanisms that are not fully understood. 189. This clearly shows a strong correspondence between embryology and the above tradition. Do the Quranic stages last 40 days each? However, there is a particular tradition that critics have claimed to be scientifically inaccurate. The following tradition has been interpreted to mean that the nutfa, alaka and mudga stages occur in 3 40-day sequences, making it a period of 120 days. This interpretation does not concur with the appearance of the embryo during this time. The Messenger of Allah, the true and truly inspired, said, "The matter of the creation of a human being is put together in the womb of the mother in 40 days, and then he becomes a clot of thick blood for a similar period, and then a piece of flesh for a similar period." 190. To clarify this seemingly inaccurate tradition, a correct interpretation would be that the 40 days are parallel, meaning that the stages occur within a 40-day period. This is supported by Another prophetic tradition which mentions that the creation of specific differentiated organs start after the first 42 days. When 42 nights have passed, God sends an angel to it, who shapes it. 191. This tradition clearly indicates that the nutfa, alaka and mudga stages occur before 42 days. Additionally, the tradition in question uses the phrase like that, which can be understood as a repetition of the time period. The phrase is mujmal, which in the classical sciences means general, whereas the aforementioned tradition is mubayyan, meaning explicit. The rule, according to the classical sciences, is that the general is specified by the explicit to give an accurate portrayal of the meaning and intention of the speaker. Many scholars such as Imam Malik and the 7th century scholar Ibn Azam Lakani reached the conclusion that the nutfa, alaka and mudga stages occur during the first 40 days. The prophetic and Jewish traditions. As ever, popular commentators persist in their attempts to show that the Prophet Muhammad copied or borrowed knowledge from other sources. One such claim maintains that the Prophet borrowed knowledge from the Talmud, which is one of the main texts of the Jewish tradition. The following prophetic tradition from Musnad Ahmad has been used by commentators to substantiate the claim that the Prophet borrowed inaccurate ideas from the Jewish tradition. He is created of both, the semen of the man and the semen of the woman. The man's semen is thick and forms the bones and the tendons. The woman's semen is fine and forms the flesh and blood. 192. The Talmud mentions something similar. Our rabbis taught, there are three partners in man, the Holy One. Blessed be he, his father and his mother. His father supplies the semen of the white substance out of which are formed the child's bones, sinews, nails, the brain in his head and the white in his eye. His mother supplies the semen of the red substance out of which is formed his skin, flesh, hair, blood and the black of his eye. 193. In response to this claim, the above prophetic tradition has a weak, da'if, chain of narration. Isnad 194. A weak tradition is considered da'if due to a gap, or discontinuity, in the chain of narrators, or due to some criticism of a narrator in the chain, such as being untrustworthy or having a bad memory. 195. In the Islamic sciences, a weak prophetic tradition is not used as a reference or taken into account when attempting to establish what the Prophet Muhammad said. Therefore, using the above tradition to claim that the Prophet was wrong, or that he borrowed from the Talmud, is unfounded. The following is another tradition that commentators use to support the claim that the Prophet Muhammad copied or borrowed medical knowledge from the Talmud. Not from all the sperm a fetus is created, and if God wills to create anything, nothing can debar him. 196. The Talmud refers to a similar concept. Man is not fashioned from all the drop but only from its purest part. 197. To use the above Talmudic excerpt to claim that the Prophet Muhammad borrowed knowledge from the Jewish tradition fails to take into account the entire corpus of material concerning this topic. For instance, the Prophet himself implied that the Jewish tradition had some sound knowledge of embryology, therefore it is highly unlikely that the Prophet deliberately sought to plagiarize or borrow from the Jewish tradition. The prophetic tradition narrated by Taban, which can be found in Sahih Muslim 198, states that one of the rabbis of the Jews came to the Prophet Muhammad to test him on his knowledge about the development of a child. The Prophet answered correctly and the rabbi became a Muslim. This clearly undermines the fact that the Prophet deliberately borrowed knowledge from the Jewish tradition, as it was clear that the Prophet knew the Jews has some knowledge on the subject. It is significant to note that the Jewish tradition has some grave errors concerning the stages of embryonic development. If the Prophet Borrowed from the Jewish tradition. Why did he reject what was wrong and take only what was accurate? This implies that the prophet had an accurate understanding of the development of the human embryo. The inaccuracies in the Talmud clearly undermine the assertion that the prophet Muhammad plagiarized knowledge from the Jewish tradition. The Talmud contains various references to the development of the human embryo. Golem, formless, rolled-up thing. Shafir Maruktam, embroidered fetus. Abar, something carried. Walad, child. Walad shel Kayama, viable child. Ben Shikaluk Hadasho, child whose months have been completed. 199. The above summary of the Talmudic understanding of the development of the human embryo is obviously dissimilar, as well as being scientifically inaccurate, to the Quranic stages explained in this study. Therefore, to claim that the Prophet Muhammad rejected the inaccuracies of the Jewish tradition and adopted the correct views on human development raises far more problems than it solves. A note on using translations. Various critics who argue the verses on embryonic development and the origins of sperm are not in line with scientific facts, tend to use the available Quranic translations to express and highlight how certain words in the Qur'an cannot be reconciled with scientific truths. This approach is flawed. Translation studies conclude that there can never be equivalence between languages. 200 and to assert this would wrongfully presume cultural and linguistic symmetry between two different languages, which is linguistically unattainable. This clarification is applicable more so to Arabic and European languages than any other, as they are both linguistically and culturally incongruous. 201 Therefore, a translation will never be a representation of the original text, and anyone who seeks total equivalence is chasing a mirage. 202 Hence, a lexical analysis, coupled with an understanding of Quranic exegesis and up-to-date knowledge of modern science, is required to form sound conclusions concerning science and the Qur'an. In attempts to close the gap between languages, a detailed exploration is required of the derivations and connotations of each and every word. As a result of this, translators produce varying translations of a single verse. Additionally, translations are heavily dependent on exegetically works and the wide range of interpretations offered by them. Citing one particular translation or restricting the evidence for points of an argument to a single interpretation does not allow for, and cannot provide, adequate grounds for reaching a proposed conclusion. With regard to verses concerning natural phenomena, interpretations will vary based upon the background information a particular exegete has on the topic. Evidently, basing conclusions on inaccurate interpretations and translations is an insubstantial and ineffectual means of inferring the Qur'an to be wrong. If all possible meanings of a particular verse were reconciled with established facts, and the results showed them to be incongruous and incompatible, then the conclusion that the Qur'an is inaccurate would be taken seriously. As yet, this has not been the case, as illuminated, established and reaffirmed with the analysis provided in this paper. On a more general note, the linguistic features of Quranic Arabic give the Qur'an depth. Its use of words with multi-layered meanings facilitates oceans of interpretations, providing the foundations and impetus for one of the world's greatest and most influential civilizations. As the academic linguist Hussein Abdul Raouf writes, the richness of Quranic language and its receptivity towards different interpretations help explain how this single book could have given shape to one of the world's great civilizations. 203. Conclusion. This paper proposed a scientific linguistic analysis of chapter 23 verses 12 to 14 of the Qur'an. Modern medical references were used to correlate between significant linguistic details in contemporary science. The results clearly illustrate the Qur'an as being concurrent with modern embryology. Additionally, contentions to the Quranic view on the development of the human embryo were responded to with particular emphasis on the plagiarism thesis, which puts forward the charge that the Prophet Muhammad plagiarized Hellenic embryology. The responses provided expose the plagiarism thesis as untenable, and lacking in explanatory power and scope. It is hoped that this paper will open the door for sincere, nuanced and frank discussions concerning the Quranic discourse. It must be understood that in order to comprehend the Qur'an, a deep study is required rather than a superficial reading of its verses. Take the analogy of a vast sea. Swimming on the surface will never give scientists knowledge of its secrets. Similarly, concerning the depth of the Qur'an, God makes this clear. And if whatever trees upon the earth were pens and the sea was ink, replenished by thereafter 7 more seas, the words of God would not be exhausted. Indeed, God is exalted in might and Wise 204. Glossary. Amnioblast, a cell derived from the ectoderm which forms the wall of the amniotic cavity, i.e. the amnion. Amniotic cavity, the cavity surrounded by the amnion, filled with amniotic fluid surrounding the fetus. Blastocyst, the hollow sphere of cells derived from the morula consisting of the inner cell mass and outer trophoblast. Cartilaginous plate, the growth plate in a developing long bone. Chorion, the membrane that surrounds the fetus, consisting of trophoblast and extra embryonic mesoderm. Chorionic villi, the finger-like protrusions of chorion and trophoblast which contain blood vessels, and are surrounded by maternal blood in the intervillous spaces. Cytotrophoblast, the cellular part of the trophoblast, as distinguished from the syncytiotrophoblast. Ectoderm, the outer germ cell layer that gives rise to the epidermis of the skin, the nervous system and sense organs. Endoderm, the inner germ cell layer from which the lining of the gut tube and its associated glandular structures are derived. Endometrium, the inner lining of the uterus in which implantation occurs. Extraembryonic chylome, the space between the layers of the extraembryonic mesoderm, also known as the chorionic activity, and separates the amnion and yolk sac from the embryo. Fetal period, the period of growth in size of the fetus from week 8 to term. Mesenchyme, loose embryonic connective tissue derived from mesoderm or neural crest. Myoblast, precursor cells of muscles, derived from intraembryonic mesoderm. Neurulation, the process of neural tube formation. Notochord, the midline structure that forms a midline axis for the embryo, and from which the intervertebral discs are formed. Celeritome, derived from the somite and giving rise to connective tissue surrounding the neural tube and notochord to form the vertebrae. Somites, most medial segmented components differentiated from the paraxial mesoderm, and giving rise to muscle of the trunk and limbs, most of the axial skeleton and part of the dermis. Syncytiotrophoblast, the outer part of the trophoblast that invades the endometrium and which contributes to the formation of the placenta. Trophoblast, cells that form the outer layer of a blastocyst which provide nutrients to the embryo and develop into a large portion of the placenta. Zygote, is the initial cell formed when 2 gamete cells are joined by means of sexual reproduction. These cells are an ovum from the female and a sperm cell from the male. Contact. Email, research@iera.org.uk. Twitter, ieraresearch@twitter.com. Web, www.iera.org.uk/research.html. Facebook, www.facebook.com/ierock. 1 Mas Abdel Halayem. The Qur'an, a New Translation. Oxford University Press. 2005, page 215. Chapter 23. Verses 12 to 14. 2 Suwar is the plural for surah. 3 Philip K. Hitti. History of the Arabs. 10th edition. Macmillan Education Limited 1968, page 126. 4c www.theinimitablequran.com. 5 Aziz Arkani, Manhil Al-Ifran Fe Ulamul Quran, Volume 1, page 21. 6 Zarkashi, Al-Burhan, Volume 1, page 13. 7 Taqi Usmani. An Approach to the Quranic Sciences. Darul Ishat. 2000, page 339. 8 Ibid, pages 344 to 360. 9 H. Abdul Rauf. Exploring the Quran. Al Maktoum Institute Academic Press. 2003, page 362. 10 The Quran, A New Translation. Oxford University Press. 2005, p. 3. Chapter 1 verse 7. 11 Ibid, page 57. Chapter 4 verses 69 to 70. 12 An Approach to the Quranic Sciences. Darul Ishat. 2000, pages 344 to 360. 13 See Quran chapter 16 verse 44 and chapter 3 verse 164. 14 An Approach to the Quranic Sciences. Darul Ishat. 2000, pages 344 to 360. 15 Al-Shatibi, Ibrahim. Al-Muwafaqat, ed. Muhammad Al-Qadr Hussein Al-Tunisi. 4 vols. Cairo, Al-Matba'ah. Al-Salafiyya, 1922. Volume 2, pages 80 to 1. 16 Al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid. Iya Ulam al-Din. Cairo, Mustafa Al-Halabi Press, 1939. Volume 1, page 296. 17 Al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid, The Jewels of the Quran, trans. By Muhammad Abu Al-Qasim. Routledge and Kagan. Paul. 1983, pages 45 to 48. 18 Jahari, Tantai. Al-Jawahir Fi Tafsir Al-Quran. Tehran, Intishara Aftab, N.D. Volume 25, page 55. 19 Bertrand Russell. Religion and Science. Oxford University Press. 1935, page 8. 20 The Quran, A New Translation. Oxford University Press. 2005, p. 227. Chapter 25 verse 2. 21 Ibid, p. 310. Chapter 41 verse 53. 22 Ibid, p. 49. Chapter 3 verse 190. 23 Ibid, p. 18. Chapter 2 verse 164. 24 Hussein Abdul Rauf. Quran Translation, Discourse, Texture and Exegesis. Curzon Press. 2001, page 66. 25 Shabir Akhtar. The Quran and the Secular Mind, A Philosophy of Islam. Routledge. 2008, page 217. 26 Michael Ruse. Evolutionary Theory and Christian Ethics in the Darwinian Paradigm. Routledge. 1989. Pages 262, 268 to 9. 27 Muhammad Mohar Ali. The Quran and the Orientalists. JIMAS. 2004, page 77. 28 The Quran, A New Translation. Oxford University Press. 2005, page 215. Chapter 23 verses 12-14. 29 John Penrice. A Dictionary and Glossary of the Quran. Dover Publications. 2004, page 70. 30 Edward William Lane. An Arabic-English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 4, page 1397. 31 Jalaluddin al-Mahali and Jalaluddin as-Suyuti. Tafsir al-Jalalain. Translated by Aisha Bewley. Dar al. Taqwa. 2007, page 730. The word used is quintessence, which encompasses the meanings mentioned here. 32 Al-Qurtubi, Nd al-Jami li-Am al-Quran. Ed. Abu Ishaq Ibrahim Tafish. Beirut, Dar al-Kitab al-Arabi. 33 Al-Tabari, 1954. Jami al-Bayan and Tawil al-Quran. Cairo, N.P. 34 Al-Baghdadi, 1988. Al-Tabmin al-Kitab wa al-Sunnah, ed. Abd al-Mutitanium Amin Kalaji. Beirut, Dar al. Marifa. 35 The Chemistry of Life, the Human Body. http://www.livescience.com/3505-chemistry-life-human- body.html. Retrieved August 7, 2011, 1309. 36 Shafi Usmani. Mariful Quran. Volume 6, page 307. 37 Hansware. A Dictionary of Modern Arabic. Edited by J. Milton Cowan. 3rd edition. 1976, page 974. 38 Lisan al-Arab Dictionary, Book 5, page 725. 39 Sahih Muslim, 614. 40 http://quran.com/75/37 Retrieved December 27, 2011, 1623. References. 41 Tafsir ibn Kathir. 42 http://quran.com/32/8 Retrieved December 27, 2011, 1623. 43 Cibn Rajab's Jami al-Ulam wal Hikam. 44 Tanwir al-Mikbaz min Tafsir ibn Abbas. 45 Tafsir ibn Kathir. 46 Sunan at-Tirmidhi Chapter No. 1, Tahara, Purification, Hadith No. 117 Narrated/authority of Aisha that she washed Maniyan from the Prophet's garments. Muslim 289, Nisaiah 294, Ibn Majah 536, Abu Dawud 373, Bukhari 230. 47 The Qur'an, A New Translation. Oxford University Press. 2005, page 401 Chapter 76 verse 2. 48 John Allen and Beverly Kramer. The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 1. 49 Byrne and Levy Physiology. 6th edition. Bruce M. Copen and Bruce A. Stanton. Mosby. 2009, page 767. 50 Martin H. Johnson. Essential Reproduction. 6th edition. Wiley Blackwell. 2007, page 86. 51 Ibid, page 778. 52 Hans Ware, page 751. 53 Ibid, page 917. 54 The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 23. 55 Hans Ware, page 634. 56 Although the literal meaning of the word is leech or worm, the co-text of the verse implies that it is leech. Like, for example, the statement, John is a lion, implies John was like a lion, whereas to say John has bones means John has bones. Hence, some terms in this paper are taken literally and others are not due to the text and understanding of the Arabic language. 57 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 5, page 2134. 58 Tasfir ibn Kathir. See his commentary on chapter 96 verse 2. 59 Barry Mitchell and Ram Sharma. Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill. Livingstone. 2009, page 2. 60. The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 27. 61. Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 10. 62. Ibid, page 11. 63. For a useful illustration, see this animation online. http://embryology.med.unsw.edu.au/movies/larson/neural.mov retrieved September 15, 2011, 8:42 am. 64. Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 5. 65. Keith Elmore and T.V.N. Persad. Before We Are Born, Essentials of Embryology and Birth Defects. 7th edition. Saunders. 2008, page 50. 66. Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 7. 67. Dale Lehman. Anatomy Demystified 2004, page 366. 68. Professor Keith Moore concluded that the embryo looks like a leech. A video of his statement can be found on YouTube at 9 minutes and 16 seconds here. http://www.youtube.com/watch?v=k_env8zr0. Retrieved January 19, 2012, 10:22. 69. Before We Are Born, Essentials of Embryology and Birth Defects. 7th edition. Saunders. 2008, page 48. 70. Ibid, page 32. See figure 4.2b. 71. Bruce M. Carlson. Foundations of Embryology. 6th edition. Tata McGraw-Hill. Special Indian edition 2007. Page 278. 72. Before We Are Born, Essentials of Embryology and Birth Defects. 7th edition. Saunders. 2008, pages 86. 87. 73. Bruce M. Carlson. Human Embryology and Developmental Biology. 4th edition. Mosby. 2009, pages 131. 134. 74. E. John Yeo, D. Jerkovic, Y. Henriot, F. Rodas, and J. Huston. Development of the Secondary Human Yolk. SAC, Correlation of Sonographic and Anatomical Features. Human Reproduction. Vol. 6 No. 8. 1991 pages. 1160 to 1166. 75. Before We Are Born, Essentials of Embryology and Birth Defects. 7th edition. Saunders. 2008, page 87. 76. Foundations of Embryology. 6th edition. Tata McGraw-Hill. Special Indian edition 2007, page 278. 77. Hans Ware, page 912. 78. An Arabic-English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 8, page 3021. 79. Ibid, Volume 5, page 2134. 80. http://www.elnajigarziar.com/en/main.php?id=94 retrieved September 8, 2011, 23:07. 81. Muhammad Mohar Ali. A word-for-word meaning of the Qur'an. Volume 2. JIMAS. 2003, page 1044. 82. Ibid. 83. T.W. Sadler. Langman's Medical Embryology. 11th edition. Lippincott, Williams and Wilkins. South Asian edition. 2010, page 76. 84 Before We Are Born, Essentials of Embryology and Birth Defects. 7th edition. Saunders. 2008, page 50. 85 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 5, page 2087. 86 Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 20. 87 Ibid, page 23. 88 The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 147. 89 See here. http://www.usc.edu/schools/college/crc/engagement/resources/texts/muslim/quran/023.qmt.html. Retrieved August 8, 2011, 9:48. 90 The Qur'an, Interpreted. Arthur J. Arbery. Oxford University Press. 1998, page 343. 91 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 6, page 2248. 92 Ibid. 93 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 5, page 2087. 94 Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 23. 95 Ibid. 96 The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 147. 97 Hans Ware, page 823. 98 Ibid, page 861. 99 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 7, page 2492. 100 Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 24. 101 The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 148. 102 Human Embryology and Developmental Biology. 4th edition. Mosby. 2008, page 333. 103 The Fundamentals of Human Embryology. 2nd edition. Wits University Press. 2010, page 148. 104 Ibid. 105 Bruce M. Carlson. Human Embryology and Developmental Biology. 4th edition. Mosby. 2008, page 224. 106 Hans Ware, page 258. 107 Ibid, page 8. 108 Muhammad ibn Umar Fakhr al-Din al-Razi, Tafsir al-Kabir. 109 Embryology, an illustrated color text. 2nd edition. Churchill Livingstone. 2009, page 1. 110 Langman's Medical Embryology. 11th edition. Lippincott Williams and Wilkins. South Asian edition. 2010. Page 91. 111 MZ Siddiqui. Studies in Arabic and Persian Medical Literature. Calcutta University. 1959, pages 6 to 7. 112 H. Bailey, ed. Cambridge History of Iran. Volume 4. Cambridge University Press. 1975, page 414. 113 A. A. Kerala. Outline of Arabic Contributions to Medicine. American Press, Beirut. 1946, page 22. 114 David C. Lindbergh. The Beginnings of Western Science. University of Chicago Press. 1992, pages 164. 165. 115 Roy Porter. The Greatest Benefit to Mankind, A Medical History of Humanity. Fontana Press. 1999, page 94. 116 Plinio Priorisci. A History of Medicine. 2nd ed. Omaha, Horatius Press. Volume 4, 2001, pages 369 to 372. 117 M. Ullman. Die Medizin im Islam. Leiden ad Cologne. 1970, pages 19 to 20, F. Rosenthal, Apud his translation. Of Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, 2, 373. 118 The Islamic World, From Classic to Modern Times. Edited, C. E. Bosworth et Alabama. Darwin. 1991, page 129. 119 William Charles Bryce. An Historical Atlas of Islam. Brill. 1981, page 355. 120 Abubakar Asadullah. Islam vs. West, Fact or Fiction. A Brief Historical, Political, Theological, Philosophical, and Psychological Perspective. iUniverse. 2009, page 76. 121 Cibn Athirs Uzud Algaba Fe Marifat as Sahaba. 122 Taberi. Tariq al-Rusul Wal Muluk, ed. M. J. Goj et Alabama. Leiden, 1879–1901, I, 2127–28, page 1116. 123 This chapter is a Meccan, which means that the verses were revealed before the migration, Hijrah, to Medina. The conquest of Taif occurred after Hijrah. The Qur'an, a new translation. Oxford University Press. 2005, page 215. 124 The Islamic World, From Classic to Modern Times. Edited, C. E. Bosworth et Alabama. Darwin. 1991, page 137. 125 Ibn al-Athir. Uzud al-Gaba fin Marifat as Shahaba. Volume 1. Beirut, Dar al-Fikr. 1993, page 469. 126 http://islampapers.com/2011/10/02/was-al-harry the source of prophets medical knowledge. Retrieved October 3, 2011, 8:46. 127 The Greatest Benefit to Mankind, A Medical History of Humanity from Antiquity to the Present Writes. Fontana Press. 1999, page 94. 128 Ibid, page 95. 129 Donald Campbell. Arabian Medicine and Its Influence on the Middle Ages. Volume 1. Kagan, Paul, Trench. Trubner and Co. 1926, page 47. 130 John May Endorf. Byzantine Views of Islam. Dumbarton Oaks Papers, Volume 18, 1964. Page 115. 131 Ibid, page 59. 132 Al-Muqtaddimah ibn Khald Nd. The Muqaddimah, An Introduction to History, France Rosenthal, Transaction. London, Routledge and K. Paul. 1958, page 150. 133 A History of Medicine. 2nd ed. Omaha, Horatius Press. Volume 4, 2001, pages 205 to 206. 134 The Rise of Medicine by Vivian Nutton in the Cambridge History of Medicine. Edited by Roy Porter. Cambridge University Press. 2006, page 57. 135 ibid. 136 http://news.bbc.co.uk/2/Africa/47052001.stm retrieved December 21, 2011, 1744. 137 Islamic medicine. Muhammad Salim Khan. Routledge and Kagel Paul. 1986 page 6. 138 Martin Lings. Muhammad, His Life based on the earliest sources. Second revised edition. The Islamic Texts. Society. 1983, page 34. 139 ibid, page 52. 140 ibid, pages 53 to 79. 141 W. Montgomery Watt. Muhammad at Mecca. Oxford. 1953, page 52. 142 Edward Gibbon and Simon Oakley. History of the Saracen Empire. London, 1870. 143 Aristotle. Generation of Animals. English trans. A. L. Peck, Heinemann. 1942 edition, page 111, 729a. 144 Ibn al-Qayyim, 1994 Al-Tibyan fi Aqsam al-Qur'an, ed. Fuad Ahmad Zamrali. Beirut, Dar al-Kitab al-Arabi. 145 ibid. 146 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 2, page 687. 147 Aristotle. Generation of Animals. Translated by A. L. Peck. Heinemann. 1942 edition. 148 IBID. 149 Aristotle. On the Parts of Animals. Translated by William Ogle. New York, Garland Publication 1987, page 40. 150 Corpus Medicorum Graecorum, Galeni di Semine, Galen, on Semen, Greek text with English trans. Philip de Lacy, Academic Verlag, 1992, pages 92 to 95, 101. 151 Henry Liddell and Robert Scott. Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 1414. 152 http://www.ucmp.berkeley.edu/history/leeuwenhoek.html retrieved December 1, 2011, 1323. 153 http://www.quran.com/75/37 retrieved December 1, 2011, 1425. 154 http://quran.com/32/8 retrieved December 1, 2011, 1427. 155 Corpus Medicorum Graecorum, Galeni di Semine, Galen, on Semen, Greek text with English trans. Philip de Lacy, Academic Verlag, 1992, pages 107 to 109. 156 Ibid, pages 162 to 167. 157 Ibid, pages 50, 87 to 89. 158 Tafsir al-Jalalain. Chapter 23 verse 14. 159 Corpus Medicorum Graecorum, Galeni di Semine, Galen, on Semen, Greek text with English trans. Philip de Lacy, Academic Verlag, 1992, pages 92 to 95. 160 Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 1227. 161 Ibid, page 36. 162 An Arabic English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 7, page 2730. 163 Ibid, Volume 3, page 917. 164 Ibid, Volume 5, page 2134. 165 Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 683. 166 Tafsir ibn Kathir. See his commentary on chapter 96 verse 2. 167 An Arabic-English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 5, page 2134. 168 Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 1375. 169 Corpus Medicorum Graecorum, Galeni di Semine, Galen, on Seaman, Greek text with English trans. Philip de Lacy, Academic Verlag, 1992, pages 92 to 95. 170 Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 460. 171 Christian Hagel. Una traducción griega anónima temprana del Corán. Los fragmentos de la refutatio de Nistus de Bizancio y la abjuratio anónima, an early anonymous Greek translation of the Qur'an, the fragments from Nicetas Byzantios Refutatio and the anonymous abjuratio. Collectanea Christiana Orientalia. 7 2010, pages 66, 72. 172 Christos Similitudes. The Byzantine understanding of the Quranic term al-Samad and the Greek translation of the Qur'an. Speculum 86, 2011, page 901. 173 Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 280. 174 Una traducción griega anónima temprana del Corán. Los fragmentos de la refutatio de Nistus de Bizancio y la abjuratio. Collectanea Christiana Orientalia 7. 2010, page 66. 175 Byzantine Views of Islam. Dumbarton Oaks Papers, Volume 18, 1964. Page 120. 176 Keys Versteeg. Greek translations of the Qur'an in Christian polemics, 9th century AD, page 55. An online source can be found here: http://menodoc.bibliothek.uni-halle.de/dmg/periodical/pageviews/135604. Retrieved February 1, 2012, 11:34. 177 The Byzantine understanding of the Quranic term al-Samad and the Greek translation of the Qur'an. Speculum 86, 2011, page 901. 178 Greek-English Lexicon. 7th edition. Harper and Brothers. 1883, page 1418. 179 Ibid, page 280. 180 Ibid, page 923. 181 Una traducción griega anónima temprana del Corán. Los fragmentos de la refutatio de Nistus de Bizancio y la abjuratio. Collectanea Christiana Orientalia 7. 2010, page 70. 182 The Byzantine understanding of the Quranic term al-Samad and the Greek translation of the Qur'an. Speculum 86, 2011, page 912. 183 http://quran.com/86 retrieved September 25, 2011, 21:23. 184 Hans Ware, page 521. 185 An Arabic-English Lexicon. Librairie du Liban. 1968. Volume 4, page 1712. 186 Ibid, Volume 1, page 301. 187 Taj al-Aruz min Jawahir al-Kamis, or refer to Muhammad Assad's footnote in his translation of the Qur'an. which can be found here. http://arthurs-classic-novels.com/Quran/Quran-Asad10.html, retrieved September 5, 2011, 1531. 188 Al-Bukhari and Muslim, narrated by Hud Haifa. 189 http://www.pbs.org/wgbh/novus/assets/sw/how-sex-determined.southwest retrieved 3 October 2011, 9:10. 190 Al-Bukhari and Muslim, narrated by Ibn Masudi. 191 narrated by Muslim, Kitab al-Qadar. 192 Musnad Ahmad, Volume 1, page 465. 193 Babylonian Talmud, Nida 31a. Accessed online http://www.come/nid-hear.nid-31.html, retrieved April 6, 2012, 1514. 194 http://tinyurl.com/6rqx5pi, a shortened URL from the Dora-r.net Hadith search database that also provides a classification the Hadith. Retrieved April 6, 2012, 1502. 195 See the Science of Hadith, which can be accessed here http://www.islamic.org/hadith/ulum/hadsciences.html. Retrieved April 6, 2012, 1507. 196 Sahih Muslim, Book of Marriage. 197 Babylonian Talmud, Nida 31a. Accessed online http://www.come/nid-nid-31.html, retrieved April 6, 2012, 1514. 198 This tradition can be found in the Book of Menstruation. 199 Joseph Needham. A History of Embryology. Cambridge University Press. 1934, page 59. 200 Qur'an Translation, Discourse, Texture and Exegesis. Curzon Press. 2001, page 9. 201 Ibid, page 5. 202 Ibid, page 7. 203 Ibid, page 65. 204 The Qur'an, with Surah introductions and appendices. The Qur'an Project. Sahih International. Translation. 2011, page 345. Qur'an chapter 31 verse 27. www.quranproject.org